Sign up in the front. I'm going to ask Dr. Watson, if you will please open us up in order of prayer. What's your mic number, 15?
Let's go to prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for continuing to look over us and help us, help look over us, especially these last few days, and help us make decisions as you would have us make these decisions. In Christ's name I pray, amen.
Thank you for that. We have a couple different judges joining us today. Our incoming president of the Superior Court Judges Council, Judge Ann Harris from Cobb County, is with us. Where's Judge Harris? Over here. Good to have you back with us. And also Judge Stephen Kelly from down at the coast in the Brunswick Circuit. Thank you, Judge, for being with us as well. We have one thing we added tonight. We have a little tip jar up here. If in the event in your presentation you say, I'm not a lawyer, but you will have to come put money in the tip jar, or you'll be asked to leave the room immediately. And until 6 o'clock, you only have to give $1. After 6 o'clock, it goes up $2 every 5 minutes. If you figure out the math, that's what you have to put in it. And I don't know what it's going for yet. We'll figure out later what we're going to do with the money, but we're going to start the tip jar for the committee. All right, let's start at the top with House Bill 909. Representative Hagan, come on up. We heard this bill in committee sometime last week, whenever it was we last met, I think. And we were working off a substitute LC 481304S. It's my understanding that is it working? It's my understanding that you have worked with parties that are interested in this bill and have a bill that everybody's on board with. Is that right?
That's right, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having us back. And we did work. Mr. Askew worked with those that were concerned to make sure that we had a substitute that would maintain the intent of what we were trying to do with the bill, but also make sure that we protected the ability of those who needed access and who had concerns. So I think we've got something that has made everybody happy, and if it would be okay with you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Askew can just go over the changes that were made quickly.
Yeah, very briefly, if everybody's happy. It might get less happy if you start talking about it.
Don't say much.
All I'm going to say is thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Yes, we're very happy to work with folks to make sure that, as Representative Hagan said, everybody who needs access to first offender records while someone is under sentence has very easy, streamlined access to that. So I'm happy to answer any technical questions along the way.
All right, any questions for the author or Mr. Askew from the committee? There's two others who want to be heard on the bill. All right. You want to step aside for a second. I'll call up James Woodall. He waives for the bill. And Mr. Thomas Weaver. Come on up, Mr. Weaver. Appreciate you joining us as always. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be brief. I know that the agenda is long. I don't have a copy to the substitute, but I don't think I'll need one. I like the bill. This is a good bill. Just one little thing that I wanted to bring to this committee's attention. I don't know what's in the cards for the future, but it was amended over in the House to include language that allows for the retention of the first offender records for want of prosecutorial and or judicial oversight when an individual goes to acquire a firearm. I understand that that's current law. I understand that that law is valid as it stands now, but I wanted to share with the committee, just so the committee has an awareness, as I did with the committee's friends out in the hall. The Georgia Supreme Court tomorrow is scheduled to hear oral arguments in the matter of Christopher Macy versus the state of Georgia for the Georgia Supreme Court's judicial interpretation and consideration to interpret the Bruin factors ascribed by the United States Federal Supreme Court for want of firearm rights. And possession of a firearm by a convicted felon or a felony first offender probationer is not within the historical analog context framework that was laid out by the by the United States Federal Supreme Court. It doesn't appear, or it may be. That's for the court to decide, and I'm not going to step on toes there. They can do that across the street in the Nathan Dill Justice Center. when they consider that matter and they release their opinion. But what the legislature is doing here is the legislature is doubling down and incorporating those references about the firearm-related matter. I don't have the substitute, but I can show you the lines. But what I'm trying to share with you as best as I know how is there may come a day, although it's valid now, it may come a day where that's no longer valid law, and the General Assembly might have to wrestle with that in the future. So for those who are lawyers in the room, you probably understand that a little bit better than non-lawyers, but I know better than to say that word because I don't have any money on me right now. No, I wasn't going to do it first because I pay a monopoly, Mr. Chairman. I've got lots of monopoly for days for everyone in here. But if my argument makes sense, I understand it's valid law now, just sharing that with the committee so the committee has an awareness of that just in case a future legislative session you have to come back and look at that again.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Appreciate you. You have a question, Mr. Weaver? You have a question? You want to come back? Senator Hatchett?
Thanks for always bringing some really good points to the legislation. Do you have a suggested change that we could make at this point, or is this more of a just kind of a heads up?
It's more of a heads up. The way that the law sits right now, it's valid. The courts haven't struck down that particular code section or that particular law yet. Some federal district courts have, some have not. So there's split in districts right now, but there's no split in circuits. So it wouldn't get to the Supreme Court on that issue. But what I'm sharing with you is if we keep referencing that stuff, there may come a day for whatever Mr. Weaver does or doesn't know, but just don't say I didn't tell you so, right? There may come a day where 1611-131 is no longer valid law, and there's going to be a lot of repeals that may have to take place. Of course, I dare not speak for our friends across the street. They'll decide for themselves. The oral arguments go live tomorrow morning at 10 if anybody wants to listen in, but you can't make this stuff up. The Supreme Court said it has to be a historical analog. You can't just say, because it's for public safety, that's not good enough.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. All right. What's the pleasure of the committee on House Bill 909? We have a motion to pass by committee substitute from Dr. Watson. We have a second. Second from Senator Kennedy. Discussion, Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just really a comment. I want to thank Representative Hagan for bringing this. It's a good bill, and I also want to thank you for the cooperative spirit that you approached when at the last hearing there were some issues and questions that were raised, and so thank you for that. I think this is a good example of how we work together and perfect the legislation. And I also want to thank Judge Stephen Kelly, who had meaningful input on this and raised some really good questions from a learned perspective from the bench, and so I appreciate his time, and he's driven up here from Brunswick. So, Judge, thank you for the work and time that you gave in on this as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a motion to pass by committee substitute on the table. It's been seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. And who is carrying the bill in the Senate?
I'd be happy to take your suggestion.
Okay. Nobody's looking at me. All right. This is when I start the... Still nobody will look up. Oh, Senator Jones. All right. Senator Jones will carry it. All right. Thank you. It's a good bill. They just didn't want to look up. All right. Next bill on the agenda, House Bill 986. Representative Thomas, come on up. We are working off a committee substitute, LC 560191S.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The floor is yours.
So everybody has the right LC number. We good? Okay, so today I'm here to present House Bill 986, LC 560131S. And so this bill originally in the House went through the Technology Committee. So what I tried to do, or what I wanted to do, is just spend a quick
One second. We have LC 560191S. Is that what you have?
No, that is not the one that I've got in front of me right now. Anyway, I know this bill so well, I'm good with it.
Well, let's make sure we got the right one. I'm going to get you a copy of what
the copy that you
we have. With everything happening so fast here at the end, let's make sure we get it right. Is that the right LC?
The one I just was handed is, yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Okay. So, as I said, this went through the Technology Committee in the House, so we had some background on the advancement of AI. And if you look, lines 14 through 16, the significant and rapid increase in the use of advancement of artificial intelligence and other sophisticated technologies pose a unique danger to the state of Georgia free and fair election systems. So I actually brought a couple quick videos. This is AI generated video from one. This was 1 year ago. This is where we were at 1 year ago.
That's hot. That's hot.
Will Smith.
Uncle Phil, come try this.
So, as you can see, that was a year ago. This is where we're at today. There's no sound in this particular clip, but you can see how realistic all of these people are AI generated. None of this is real content. It's a new technology system called Sora. And it can create some of the most realistic images that you can possibly imagine. And that's where we've gone in 1 year. So, as you'll see, I provided you all with a packet. The cover letter is by Heritage Action, but you'll notice that there's two other attachments, and I won't advertise who they are, but both of these individuals have come out against this bill. And I thought that what we needed to do to be appropriate and show that these are individuals that don't support this bill, the true power of AI. So I'm actually going to have these two individuals present the bill to you.
Hi, I'm an AI depiction of Todd Jones, and I want to introduce you to my AI-generated friend Mallory to talk about the need for HB 986.
Hi, I'm Mallory, Director of the State Freedom Caucus. I want all of you to know that I was wrong about HB 986. This bill is vital to protecting the integrity of our elections. I think it would be good for us to hear from my friend Colton Moore about the importance of this bill.
Thank you, Mallory. This is Senator Colton Moore, Chairman of the Georgia Freedom Caucus. I know that I don't always see eye to eye with many of you. Luckily, by the power of AI, I am here to speak in favor of a Republican bill, proof that miracles do happen. HB 986 is a great bill that addresses one of the single most imminent threats to our election integrity. It creates a crime to upload materially deceptive media with the knowledge of its falsity and the intent to influence an election, create confusion about the administration of an election, or to influence a referendum. The media addressed in this bill includes video, audio, or images that appear to depict a real individual's speech or conduct that did not occur in reality and would appear to a reasonable observer to be true. It clearly defines a person as individuals operating within a PAC, a campaign, or a political party. It is very specific to ensure it in no way infringes on any Georgia citizen's First Amendment rights. This bill only applies to career politicians and their deep state political operatives. However, I would ask the committee, how is using my biometric data, like my voice and likeness, to create media supporting a policy that I clearly don't agree with, the First Amendment right of another person? What if I were to say, I am Senator Colton Moore and I'm running for Congress in Georgia's 14th Congressional District? Now that voice clip is spread across my district. The overwhelming number of Georgians believe the use of my personal characteristics against my will is fraud, but our laws don't currently reflect that. If AI can be used to make Colton Moore speak in favor of a popular piece of legislation, it can be used to make any one of you say things you've never said. Are you prepared to deal with the consequences of allowing AI deepfakes to remain a viable and legal campaign strategy? This deepfake was made by Representative Brad Thomas and Todd Jones and was an impersonation of Mallory Staples and Colton Moore. A very cheap and readily available version of artificial intelligence was used to make all of the content you just heard. Anyone could have created this content. Mallory, as we've seen here today, nobody is safe from AI deep fakes.
Wow, it really is breathtaking how easily we can become the victims of an AI deep fake. If we don't take action to keep this from becoming a viable campaign strategy, it will come back to bite us.
Hi, I'm an AI depiction of Todd Jones, and I want to introduce you to my AI.
So, if that doesn't say it, I don't know what does. Again, we're at this point in our society where generative AI was the most powerful tool that will ever. It surpasses the invention of the wheel. This is what the future's built on, but it has nefarious uses. The technology does. And one of those, which has recently been done, is there was a robocall that was AI generative technology of Joe Biden, and he called around and told people not to vote. That's addressed in here. That's the type of issues that we're concerned with, because when you create confusion about the administration of an election, that affects the integrity of our elections, and that's what this bill goes through. So it creates a crime, as AI Colton so very well said. It creates a crime to put this type of media out, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this point.
All right, questions from the committee for the author. All right, there are others that signed up to speak on the bill. If you want to step aside, we have a few others here. We'll start. Is it William Quinns? I can't read. Okay, come on up. I had it right. Come on up, Mr. Quinns. Good evening.
Good afternoon. Good evening. So, William Quinn, I am speaking on behalf of myself today. And I didn't bring any AV extras. I apologize for that. I'm very impressed with what Representative Thomas was able to put together. So what I'd like to talk about is what this bill is and what it isn't. The proponents would say that it is about election integrity. The problem is that election integrity, as it relates to what people in Georgia are concerned about, is not this, at least not at the moment. They're concerned about things like, how is it that an election in DeKalb can report a winner, and then the winner then becomes the loser, and the loser becomes the winner? How is that possible? What does this bill do to investigate that and remedy it? Nothing. What does it do to look into why senior members of the Secretary's of State's office in federal court under oath, when asked,
Mr. Quinns, you're gonna address this bill?
Yes, but I'm showing what it doesn't do, and then I'm going to point out what I believe it does. I'll give you
some leeway, but we have a long agenda. We got to stick with the bills we have on the floor right now. So if you can get to this bill.
So the bill talks only to the factors of artificial intelligence and so forth. That today, what we're talking about is images, sounds, comments. Fundamentally, there's no difference between what people see and hear from AI and what they might see and hear from other things. We all remember, for example, videos years ago where Paul Ryan's seen pushing a woman off a cliff in a wheelchair. Was that real? Could they have assumed it was real? That had nothing to do with AI. But the concern here is that this bill speaks more to censorship. And the reason it does is because fundamentally we have to maintain the constitutional rights, both for the U.S. Constitution and Georgia. And that's why this is so critical. It's no coincidence, perhaps, that less than 3 weeks ago, Tucker Carlson and Michael Benz, an expert in censorship and things like artificial intelligence, brought up this exact thing. These concerns came out in Europe a number of years ago, and they criminalized certain types of speech. Once we start going down that road, almost any type of speech is open to interpretation. Government is not going to be able to legislate thought, intent, or the outcome of certain actions during elections. Nobody wants bad information, but I will tell you, Georgians are pretty darn smart. I'll give you an example from just this week. During the middle of the week, a news article supposedly came out saying that Judge Amy Totenberg had ordered that the UN administer Georgia elections. Look right on its face. But people across Georgia took exception to it and said this has to be checked. They did. It began being checked within minutes or hours and was squashed within about a day. How? Because people are paying attention. They're watching out for the data they get and making their choices. So I would ask the committee to fulfill your oaths to protect first the U.S. Constitution and the Georgia Constitution. Don't let censorship begin to creep in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. You have a question from the committee if you want to sit tight. Senator Setzler.
Do you think that fraud should be legal?
Fraud? Provable fraud? No.
Okay. If someone perpetrates a fraud, let's say they perpetrated a fraud that had some grotesque expression of a Republican candidate, in some compromising circumstance, and it happened 2 days before the election. There's a knowledge that in Republican politics, there's a disproportionate number of folks vote on election day. They don't vote early. And if a fraud was perpetrated across the entire state, showing the presidential candidate doing some awful thing that was believable, not something that's so crazy it's unbelievable, but believable, and they lost the state in a general election by 11,779 votes, would that be okay if it was fraudulent?
No, not if it's fraudulent.
So what we're wrestling with is what is fraud and what is not fraud. I'm a First Amendment absolutist with you. What we're trying to wrestle with here, though, is if a fraud is perpetrated and there's not time to reel it back in and sort of manage it, and it has an impact on our nation's elections, that's what we're wrestling with. This is not a non-issue. It's how do we manage what is demonstrably fraud in ways that you don't always have time to kind of put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Well, I would suggest that your question presupposes, one, that there's not time, and two, that there's not the ability to look into whether something is real or made up. And I think that's true of almost anything. Campaigns in and of themselves often contain information that may not be interpreted the same way by everybody. Sometimes they're just plain false. So fraud is fraud. I agree with you. I believe that there are ways to address it that don't create, in a broad way, with predisposition that somebody's going to do something like this wrong, and don't create a risk for inappropriate application. Somebody might do something that they think is funny, and all of a sudden it's interpreted as false, and they're charged with a felony. Is that right? Most of the political cartoonists might take umbrage with that.
All right, Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Quinn, you said at the top of your comments that this bill speaks to, or in essence, your concern is it equates to censorship. Mm-hmm. Is there a particular provision in the proposed bill that concerns you, or are you speaking to just generally your understanding of the broad application of the whole bill?
So the proponents of the bill would suggest that it only applies to certain people in certain roles. I would suggest that even those are open to interpretation, and so with even in the future, perhaps at some point, minor changes, it could apply to a population much greater. That is a risk to the populace, I believe, of Georgia and elsewhere. I mean, there's a reason why others have spoken to this sort of state-level imposition of censorship becoming creating a crime from something to do with communication. You'll never know. Legislation will never tell us what people meant when they say something. And at the end of the day, we're talking about creating thought crimes, perhaps.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, thank you.
Thank you for your questions.
Next, we have Cindy Battles with the People's Agenda. Coming to Judiciary a lot these days.
At some point, you'll start bringing me cake. Thank you, Chairman and Committee. Again, my name is Cindy Battles. I'm with the Coalition for the People's Agenda. I really appreciate Representative Thomas's work on this bill as it moved through the House. I know that you and I have had conversations. We're actually in support of the bill and the work it does to combat misinformation and disinformation during an election year. My only suggestion, and I've mentioned this to the sponsor as well, is I'd like to change the penalties some. I think that a first offense for something like this, unless we're talking about something that actually encourages violence, should be something like 90 days and a fine of not more than $1,000 or both. If they are trying to commit violence, or they are trying to perpetuate violence, I think that that should probably be something more to 1 year and $3,000 fine. I don't think it should reach the level that's currently in this bill until there's more than one offense. And I think there's a big difference between something like what we saw recently where someone used AI to create a picture of President Trump surrounded by loving black women, and something else saying Bo Hatchett doesn't like UGA football, so we should throw him off a bridge or something. Sorry, I just like picking on you. So that would be my only suggestion. Other than that, we're in full support of the bill, and I'm open to any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Battles? You have a question from Senator Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was looking at page 4 on line 76 through 77. Can you tell me how that part would work where it says any organization that represents the interests of voters likely to be deceived by the distribution of material? How would we determine what the organization is? I mean, would they have to be a registered organization? I mean, how would we determine that they represent the interests of voters, that they could bring the...
I mean, as an organization that regularly represents the interest of voters, I think that there's a lot that we have to do to go through that. I think as someone who has been deposed numerous times, we would have to say, this is the work that we did, this is the harm that we saw, that kind of thing. So I think that is determined before you even go to trial. And I'm not putting money in the tip jar, right? I'm not going to say the words, but but I am surrounded by a number of good ones who have
it's close.
who have proven this for us.
Okay.
Look, I know how to skirt it.
It's fair.
So close.
Senator Rhett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you think $50,000 is enough to deter organizations from doing things like we just saw here today? Because some of these organizations, they rake in millions of dollars. It's just like in pro sports. It always makes me laugh if an athlete commits an infraction and they fine him $10,000. He or she probably say, "Well, here's my checkbook. Write your own check." I just wanted to get your opinion. Do you think $50,000 is enough to deter people from doing that moving forward?
I mean, with all due respect, I don't think a fine is enough to deter anyone. I think that there is a whole problem with this idea, and we've said this before, where enhanced penalties and mandatory minimums do not deter crime. So if they've got $50,000 to spend, they're going to do it anyway, which is one of the reasons why I wouldn't pass legislation that immediately goes to that level.
All right, thank you, Ms. Battles. Those are all the questions.
Thank you.
Last. All right. Last up, Chelsea Thompson with Frontline. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. So my name is Chelsea Thompson. I'm General Counsel of Frontline Policy. I'm here to share our support for HB 986. To address a couple of things, just real quick, a couple of things within the bill. This bill, we would argue, protects the democratic process. The emergence of artificial intelligence and sophisticated technologies presents a new challenge to the integrity of elections, and by addressing the issue of AI-generated media to deceive voters, this bill then safeguards the democratic process in Georgia. The deliberate dissemination of materially deceptive media aimed at influencing election outcomes or sowing confusion undermines the foundation of free and fair elections. Therefore, enacting the measures within this bill works to counter such interference and is essential to maintaining the integrity of the electoral system and ensuring that voters can make informed decisions based on accurate information. We would argue also this bill preserves freedom of speech. This bill combats fraudulent election interference and the importance of balancing the protection of free speech rights. So this bill carefully delineates between the prohibited deceptive practices and constitutionally protected activities, such as you see in the bill, satire, parody, works of artistic expression, and journalism works. By explicitly exempting activities protected by the First Amendment, this legislation therefore upholds the principles of free expression while targeting only those actions that are intended to deceive voters or manipulate election outcomes, and this approach ensures that legitimate forms of political discourse remain unaffected while curbing malicious attempts to undermine the electoral process. This bill also establishes accountability and deterrence, as you see in the bill, through clear legal consequences for individuals or entities engaged in fraudulent election interference. So because of these reasons, honestly, just keeping it short, we just ask that you vote do pass on HB 986.
All right, any questions for Ms. Thompson? Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. You want to briefly close this out, Representative?
Yes, I do. Thank you. There's one more group. You have a letter. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make it again. It's Heritage Action for America. They have over 2 million conservative activists nationwide, and they are also in support of 986 for the very reasons that we have discussed today. The first, it's very tightly written to political campaigns and groups. So the individual that said it was concerned about somebody making a deep fake and sharing it with their buddies, they're not covered under this bill. They are not touched by this bill. You have to be part of a political action committee, campaign, or political organization. Secondly, the crime here is to upload that media. It's actually not even, this bill does not even make it against the law to make one. It just makes it against the law to upload one knowing that it's false with the intent to deceive, which is a really high standard here. This isn't something that's, just hey, we're just going to come get you because you shared something funny. Thirdly, I would say that, like I said, I think the big thing is the intent. I think that's the key. And it also creates the crime of solicitation for the same thing. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions otherwise.
All right, Senator Setzler.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I do have 3 questions. First, I want to be sensitive to time, but this is a very weighty bill. It's important content. I'll state them, then I'll come back to them. One, the definition of person, giving a blanket exemption to people who work for streaming platforms. I don't know why we're doing that. They could be the bad actor themselves, and streaming platforms shouldn't have exemption or some kind of immunity from this just because of how they're positioned in their marketplace. If they're the perp, they ought to be able to be accountable. Secondly, have a recommended, hopefully friendly amendment on line 63. It says any act which was committed in furtherance of lawful conduct. I think tying that to where the message was received. You've got where the candidate lives, where the defendant lives, and then you have where if one lives in Cobb, one lives in Chatham, but the message was received in Columbus or Macon. I think where it's received is what you mean on line 63. I would offer that as a consideration. And then I would like to, the Minority Whip asked the question about lines 76 and 77, any organization that represents the interests of voters likely to be deceived. I think that's paragraph 4 is problematic. I'm cool with Attorney General. I'm cool with the individual depicted or the candidate. But opening it up to some third-party organization that may or may not have any direct interest, there could be chaos about which of 4 different organizations want to intervene and engage, and how is that adjudicated? That could be. So those are concerns I had. And Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask the gentleman about person on lines 38 through 47. I appreciate the intent of the bill. Why are we giving exemptions for people who could be perps just because run a streaming platform?
Okay. A lot going on there with that question.
I know I'm going to get shut down for time. I just threw it all at you.
No, and that's okay. I think the first part of this has to do with the definition of a person and what you're talking about. The reason why we're keeping it tightly prescripted to campaigns and PACs is because they're the ones that have the money to actually make something that would be believable. You're a random person off the streets and they're really not going to have access to the level of technology you're going to need to make something believable at the moment. And so that having that amount of money available to make that is part of the reason. As for the exemptions, I'm sorry, could you tell me the line again?
Well, again, for person means any employee, staff member, or other similarly affiliated individual. Goes on. Then it says such terms shall not include. Okay, so individual could be a political party, a body, candidate, campaign committee, political action committee, or other political committee. So there's a specific tie.
Right.
A very limited set of circumstances where you're tied to a political entity. If it shall not include broadcaster, cable provider, which starts to make sense. But if I run a streaming platform, if I'm a streamer and I've got this technology and I'm just a political entrepreneur in my parents' basement eating pizza, working at 4 o'clock in the morning doing this stuff, I'm exempt from this if I run a streaming platform. I don't know why I've got to be tied to a political organization to create mass harm with this. I think we're exempting people that we specifically ought to be including. If they commit the act, if their acts meet these elements, they ought to be subject to the prohibition.
So I think that as for streaming platform, to me, I think I'm going to just name one like Hulu, for example. And sometimes Hulu has commercials. And sometimes, if someone was to broadcast something on that streaming platform that they weren't aware of, for whatever reason, then, the question is, should they be held liable? And I think this is one of those things that we can continue this debate. But I would say that to take that out would be, I think it would be detrimental to the fact that now all of a sudden you have these stream platforms, maybe something did get put up on it, and now they got a 50,000. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Let me take it back a little bit. It would be a person with the definition that we have right here. It would be. I'll just be honest with you. I think you probably made a decent point on that one. If you want to strike it out, go ahead.
I want to be, and I don't want to create chaos. I just want to. There are people who it is their hobby to do these kinds of things. They become quite sophisticated. I just want to make sure we're thinking our way through this. It shouldn't just be tied to political organization. I think because those organizations have natural limitations on their ability to do harm, they have to do disclosures. They're subject to all kinds of existing laws. It's probably the sort of dark figure that's sort of doing this themselves, tunneling through some server in Singapore so they can drop something back on those folks are sophisticated, to me, could create the most harm, and I just wanted you to rethink before we...
And it's just I think we really do have to keep this bill really tightly written right now. And let me explain why. Because I don't doubt that there is potential First Amendment impacts if we make any changes. Right now, political organizations, that we can tightly prescribe. But once you start bringing in private entities and companies, then the question becomes what were those protections for those? And now have we just created a First Amendment issue in a bill that currently I don't believe has any First Amendment issues? So what I would say is let's let this continue. Right now there is absolutely no direction from the federal government on this. By the way, the best that I've been told is that we might get you something in 3 years. I have an election season running up this year right now, and we have no real direction or case law from the judicial branch. So once again, it comes down to reading tea leaves. So if we keep it as tightly prescribed as we can to protect our elections, and that's what this bill does. And we can again have that dialogue next year in the off season about expanding that or contracting it or whatever. But right now this is tightly prescribed, and I believe it'll pass the First Amendment test as written.
I'm not disputing that it will. My concern is we're exempting people who are, in my view, are perhaps the most dangerous and limiting it to groups that are perhaps the least dangerous.
And we're exempting the regular people off the street. They're exempt from this as well, because I don't believe that they have the money to be able to create that. But I want to keep this really tight. again, I believe that these political action committees and candidates are the ones that have the money to be able to do this. They have the $50,000. Your guy off the street, I don't think they're going to have enough money to be able to generate this technology.
How much did it cost for you guys to do the Colton Moore piece?
Well, to be fair, it probably was next to nothing. So, but
I rest my case.
Yeah, but to be fair, now you're starting to get into what's First Amendment right and what's not, where this is tightly prescribed such that it doesn't rub against that First Amendment right. Now, I would agree with you. I don't believe fraudulent speech is protected free speech, but I think that we're at the cutting edge of what this technology can do, and we're trying to get some basic guardrails up. And as we get direction from the court system, and as we get direction from, I don't trust federal government, but maybe they might have something that they can glean an idea off of. Then at that point, maybe that's the time. But let's not let really a perfect get in the way of really good.
Senator Hatchett.
Just to answer the Senator Setzler's question and kind of ask the author this question, at the end of line 42 and on to line 43, the employees or agents of the streaming platform, it says, who otherwise would not fall under this definition of person except for their sale of advertising to a person as defined in this paragraph. That's kind of narrowly tailored to the people who sell advertising, correct? So it's not just a blanket exemption of everybody who owns or operates a streaming platform.
And Senator Hatchett, thank you. That actually is very, that's correct. And I appreciate you bringing that up.
Any other questions from the committee? Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going back to that line 76 and 77 about how to define the organization. Just trying to figure that part out that represents the interests of voters likely to be deceived by distribution of material and deceptive media. How are we going to determine whether that organization is legitimate or not legitimate, I guess is the question.
I could tell you that sometime, I guess you know it when you see it. If you're not amenable to that line, I'm fine with striking it out. I really am. You could do an amendment to it and strike it. I'd be fine with it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, what's the pleasure of the committee? Do we have a motion from the committee? All right, at this time, there's no action from the committee on the bill. Senator Kennedy?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to pass.
We have a motion to pass by committee substitute from Senator Kennedy. Do we have a second? Second from Senator Redd. Just start a little slowly for you.
Yeah, start a little slow.
All right. I don't know if this is for discussion or amendment. Senator Setzler.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for one amendment by striking lines 76 and 77 in their entirety.
But you also need to strike the or in the semicolon on line 75 and put a period and put a or after the semicolon on line 73.
As the chairman stated, yes, sir. That's exactly what I had in mind.
All right. Is there a second to the proposed amendment? Second from Senator Jones. Are we good, Michael? Patrick? All right. We have a motion. Any further discussion? It's been seconded. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. All right. Do you have another one, Senator Setzler?
Mr. Chairman, this is intended to be a friendly amendment, and I'm trying to interpret this, and I think I'm interpreting it properly. Line 63 reads, any act was committed in furtherance of the unlawful conduct. It's this venue provision in subsection F. I would suggest striking act was committed and inserting in its place message was received or content was received. I'll say content was received. Any content was received in furtherance of the unlawful conduct. So if you delivered a message, perhaps even from some far off venue, if it was generated in Florida, paid for by somebody, but it's being delivered in Georgia, the point where the content was received ought to be a venue opportunity, because that's really where that's where I think the act is being committed, where the content is received. I'm not sure act is committed. What does that mean? Is the act pushing transmit on my computer?
So the act, as defined by the law, would be the broadcasting of deceptive media and the uploading of that media. That's the act. That's the actual act.
So if the act is, if it's transmitted in Belarus or in Mexico, is that where its venue is? Or if it's delivered to 4 million homes in Georgia, to me, venue should be anywhere that the content is delivered. That's the effect. That's where the act is happening.
But just if you get in that, you kind of open up a whole other issue with, what DA is going to bring it, because what if it's a statewide race?
Well, that's the point. In my view, if it's affecting my community, if I'm in the 8th Congressional District and in South Georgia, and it's peppering my district, I think anywhere it's received, that should be a venue operator. That would be my amendment, Mr. Chairman. I'm just offering that, and I wanted feedback from the author. Add content was received.
One thought on this: if you're trying to make it where there will be venue in the state, line 64 does have it where the candidate affected resides, and so that would, at that point, allow it to be where the candidate resides. I think if you look at line 63, it's currently written, you got to go back to line 45, and you're looking at where the act was committed. The act is the publishing, broadcasting, streaming, or uploading. So there's a difference in policy. It's a question for the committee as to whether you want the venue to be where the act occurred or where the content was received. I think there are two different things.
Well, I mean, if this is an attack on the gentleman from the 46th, you live in Athens, Clark, but it's being focused in Oconee County where he represents, then and it's being delivered from Atlanta. It's a focus on Oconee County. There ought to be venue in my mind in Oconee County where the messages are being delivered. So I'm simply suggesting maybe it's, rather than striking where the act was committed, maybe it needs to be in addition to that. But I think where the content was received ought to be an opportunity for a venue. That's all I'm suggesting, Mr. Chairman. So let me restate my amendment. My amendment will be adding a paragraph 4 between 65 and 66. It'd be a new paragraph that would simply say, any location where the content was received in furtherance of the unlawful conduct.
And obviously redoing the or and putting the semicolon on line 65. Okay.
Correct.
Is there a second for the proposed amendment? All right, the amendment fails for lack of a second. Did you have any other, Senator Kennedy?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize the posture. This is on his amendment.
Yeah, so is there a second?
Venue provision?
Yeah.
I would second his amendment.
So we have a second from Senator Kennedy. Does everybody understand what the amendment is being offered? So you'd be adding a new, I'll go and let you say it, Senator Setzler.
Paragraph 4 between lines 65 and 66, change the location of the or in the semicolon and adding a new paragraph that says, any location where the content was received in furtherance of the unlawful conduct, period. And if council has a better way of phrasing that, I'll defer to council.
Mr. Walker.
Thank you. The last clause does give me some pause. It suggests that you're receiving it in furtherance of the offense. I assume that you're not wanting the person who's receiving the information to also be susceptible to the charges. So if you're receiving it in furtherance of the offense, I might suggest this alternative language, Senator. The paragraph 4 would just read, and reading from line 62 or 61 and 62, it would be in any county in this state where, and then the amendment would be paragraph 4, the materially deceptive media is received.
Thank you.
All right. Still a second for you, Senator Kennedy?
Yes.
All right. Any further discussion on the proposed amendment? You want to read it one more time for us, Mr. Walker?
Yes, we would strike the or on line 64. We would strike the period at the end of line 65 and replace it with a semicolon and underscore or, and we would insert after line 65, paragraph 4, the materially deceptive media is received.
All right. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. All right. Any other amendments from the committee? Any further discussion? All right. We have a motion to pass by committee substitute now as amended. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Nine. All those opposed? One. All right. Motion carries. Who's carrying the bill in the Senate?
Senator Albers.
Senator Albers. All right. All right. Let's go to your next bill while you're here.
Thank you very much. I
House
appreciate
Bill
it.
1361. Let's get the LC. We are also working off a committee substitute, LC 481302S. Floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill creates the crime of creating artificially, I guess, generative AI of child explicit conduct. And I'm trying to say it carefully because we're online and just in case there's anyone listening. But it depicts anything that depicts an image of a child that would appear realistic to an average observer engaging in explicit conduct. It basically creates the crime. Right now, what's happening is, as we've went through the technology committee, we've heard feedback about how basically what's happening is they're scraping images of children off of Facebook and creating new images, and they're using those images using generative AI to create, like I said, explicit conduct media, and because it's not clear in our law that that type of media is illegal. This clarifies that and makes it illegal, and that's pretty much the bill in a nutshell. Sorry, that's a quick presentation. So, with that, I'll open the floor for questions. I'd be happy to take questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for the author on House Bill 1361? There are others that want to be heard on the bill too. All right, thank you. We'll start with Ms. Chelsea Thompson again with Frontline. Is Chelsea still in the room? Yeah. All right, come on up. Welcome back.
Thank you, Chairman. Members of the committee. So again, Chelsea Thompson, General Counsel of Frontline. Again, just going to try and keep it real short. We are here to show our support for HB 1161, prohibiting the distribution of computer-generated obscene material depicting a child. So this bill serves as a crucial measure to further safeguard children from exploitation and harm by prohibiting the distribution of computer-generated obscene material depicting a child. This legislation aims to prevent the creation and dissemination of realistic but fabricated imagery that exploits minors. Such material can perpetrate the objectification and victimization of children, and by penalizing those who engage in such activities, this bill sends a strong message that the exploitation of children will not be tolerated, and thereby enhancing their protection and safety here in Georgia. And prohibiting the distribution of computer-generated obscene material depicting a child, this bill also reflects Georgia's collective commitment to decency and dignity and respect for human dignity, and for our children also, particularly the innocence and vulnerability of our children. I'd also like to add as well that in a sense it kind of closes up a loophole as well, because as you're getting into, as we saw videos, right, with AI production, as it gets more similar to realistic attributes, you get into this almost like this battle, right, at this potential loophole of a defense that could be like, well, it's AI generated versus it being realistic in actual reality. But anyway, we would ask that you vote to pass on HB 1361.
All right, thank you, Ms. Thompson. Next, we have Mac Parnell with Georgia Faith and Freedom Coalition. Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, that tip jar is just tempting me right now.
You have a little cash? It's after 6.
That's right. It's going up.
I have no idea how to calculate what's owed after what I said.
I don't either.
Yeah, we'll just take whatever you have.
My dad is an attorney, so I'm getting pretty close there. And he said, Mac, when I was considering going to law school, he said, Mac, if you want an attorney, hire one, don't be one. So, but I have great respect for the profession. Appreciate all of my attorney friends here. Thank you so much to Representative Thomas for bringing this legislation. This is an important piece of legislation. I'm quite frankly sad that this is a discussion that we have to have, but it's an important issue to address, and we would ask your favorable consideration on this to protect our families. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next, we have Paul Smith with Citizen Impact. Good evening. It's evening.
Good evening.
It's not night yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Smith with Citizen Impact. We represent churches all across Georgia, and we're concerned about moral issues here in the state. Several years ago, I became aware that these obscene images, again, trying to use delicate language, that were computer generated was not illegal here in Georgia. And I met with GBI and their division that enforces this. I was surprised to learn that not only are these images that are computer generated not illegal, but they have trouble identifying what is real images, which they can prosecute, and which are fake computer generated images, which they cannot. And that was several years ago. This was before AI. So I had met with members of the prosecuting attorneys and GBI trying to determine how can we address this issue. And I found it to be very difficult because of ancillary concerns, First Amendment concerns, or even accidentally making innocent images illegal. So I was glad when Senator Hatchett also and Representative Thomas introduced legislation addressing this issue. I think this is a very small step in what could be done, but we're grateful for it and we support the legislation.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Last up, Mike Griffin with Georgia Baptist. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Griffin. I'm the Public Affairs Representative of the Georgia Baptist Mission Board. And y'all have heard me mention this before. I not only cover the area of public affairs, but also child protection policy is one of our top 4 priorities in legislation that we have here at the Capitol. We believe that children are one of our most vulnerable groups of people in our nation. We're living in a day when children are suffering the most from the societal ills that we're facing in our country. And we support this legislation. We appreciate Representative Thomas bringing it forward. We're concerned that we are living in a day when this type of material is out there that is exploiting our children. It's encouraging sexual predators. And while it may not be literal porn, as some were afraid to say here today, it does bring shame to our children, and it does encourage the immorality and the misuse of children that's going on out here today. We do believe that we need to not only be a part of rescuing those that are in distress and in need in the stream, but we need to go upstream and find out where some of this is happening. And this type of thing is encouraging what we're dealing with in relationship to our children today. And we think that any kind of protection, especially regarding this area, is very important in protecting our children and also protecting them from sexual predators as well, which will be encouraged by being able to look at this type of obscenity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate the committee's favorable consideration of this legislation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Griffin. All right. That's everyone that's signed up to speak on the bill. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Question.
Senator Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question, and I don't know if they're here. I think Pack's in the back. I have a question. This addresses the issue of AI-generated, seemingly real kiddie porn. The question I have is do we have a statute today, if it's not generated by AI, it's generated by somebody that has the ability to create near lifelike porn, is that criminalized today under our current law?
Mr. Robert Smith with Prosecuting Attorneys Council, welcome.
Hi. I was trying to hide in the back.
You could have worn a green tie instead of a purple one today. It's kind of St. Patrick's Day.
The beautiful thing about this is that it's 4-in-1. So
do you want to re-tie it for the next bill?
It's a bipartisan tie. I can change if I need to.
Oh, I get what you're doing.
To answer the senator's question, right now our child pornography laws require a distinctive child. That is the problem, not the problem, but the issue we have with these something that's completely computer generated, where there never was a distinctive child, is not covered. Basically, if you can trace the image back to a child, or that it's obvious that it was a child of some type that's been altered or changed, we can prosecute underneath our laws. That's what the representative's bill does, is it fills in the gap that's been created.
But what I'm asking, though, is I don't doubt that this fills the gap. My question is, what's still open in the gap is AI is a self sort of operating system that can create these things. What I don't think this bill addresses that it would seem very easily to also address, which is another part of the gap, which is something that is an image that the final product looks exactly like this looks, but it's executed by somebody in a lifelike looking design tool where they're creating fake kiddie porn, but it's not an AI algorithm that's creating it. It's an individual that's creating it, and that's still not criminalized by this.
I think it might be. I'm not sure, and that's one of those things of getting into all the nuances of how things are created. And one of the things that we do have to take into account is federal law. We have to take into account a federal U.S. Supreme Court decision called Ashcroft, which protects First Amendment speech. And I think that this is, the intent on this is trying to get as close as we can. I recognize the senator is asking about things that are being created, and I think that we tried, the language does get to there.
But my question is, show me where the language is. If the AI take the exact same final product that the AI system generates, if that's generated by a
electronic difference image of the child will appear realistic to an average observer.
You're talking about the script.
Yeah.
The problem you're reaching is not. This doesn't go after the creators. This just goes after the distributors, and that's a one step at a time approach. It's this is this is your world. If y'all want to this is the language the statute is.
Well, that was my second question, Mr. Chairman. Both those things is that we're the person that the person that builds the AI algorithm that creates and promulgates this is completely not criminalized in this, and although we could do it pretty easily, I think. I don't want this committee to hurtle forward so fast that we're missing that.
One of the other problems to think about as well is that we need intent to be able to prosecute, and that it gets into the First Amendment steps as to if someone is creating this, we have to look about what is their intent when they create it. And we have to protect the First Amendment has to protect certain activity, even though my personal belief has always been we may not always agree with speech, and with things that are protected under the First Amendment, we have to allow it to be protected of those things. This bill goes more about looking at the intent. If you're distributing it, then we can say what the purpose is for the intent of creating it.
But if I'm not mistaken, the possession of kiddie porn today, real pornographic pictures, is a per se violation. My possession of it, there doesn't have to be an intent component. If I have knowing possession of it, then it's a crime.
Go ahead. You need to see the bill again.
I need to see it in a different code section. I need to look at a different code section because I don't know if that's completely accurate. I think there's something beyond mere possession. I think we have to do something beyond merely say, hey, you were in possession of this. I think there's. And I don't want to misstate this, but I think there's a requirement about why the person's in possession of it.
I mean, I think it's a knowingly thing. I think it's knowingly and in possession. I think does it. If it's lingering in the hard drive of a computer I bought used, that's not, I can maybe get away, but I think it's knowingly possession. I wanted to make sure I think there's an easy way that in distribute, solicit, possesses, I think possesses is here. Do we not want to have an element of this, Mr. Chairman, that says creates an AI algorithm that creates it? If the creator gets off but the possessors don't, should we just catch that as we go? That's all I'm asking, Mr. Chairman.
All right. What's the pleasure of the committee on the bill? We have a motion to pass from Dr. Watson by committee substitute. Is there a second? Second from Senator Calzert. There was discussion earlier about Senator Halpern. You want to come up about a bill we heard in this committee earlier this year? It was Senate Bill 182, the doxing bill that Senator Halpern worked really hard on about adding it as an amendment to this bill. Senator Parent, I think, was going to offer that. Senator Parent.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Strickland. Everyone hopefully recalls our discussion over 2 hearings, I believe, on SB 182, where we unanimously voted that committee substitute out, and I think it just ran out of time on crossover day. But it deals, of course, with doxing and intentionally posting another person's personally identifying information without their consent, et cetera. So I want to offer an amendment to include that legislation as part of this bill. And I do have the language ready at the appropriate time. But did you want to add anything, Senator Halpern?
Only that I appreciate the bill sponsor in allowing me to, or you, to make this amendment proposal to add that language to his bill. So I appreciate your willingness to work with me on that. And as you heard, it is a bill that we unanimously passed and has the support of many of the organizations that you've already heard from supporting this bill.
Great. So the amendment, Mr. Chairman, would be to include committee substitute, Senate Committee on Judiciary's substitute to SB 182 and make conforming changes.
Mr. Walker, do we have to say anything else for the amendment to work?
Yeah, with the leeway from the committee and the chair to make all those conforming changes as necessary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have a second for the proposed amendment? Second from Senator Jones. Any discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. All right, back to the underlying motion. Senator Setzler, another amendment?
Yes, sir. Sure. I appreciate the way this is constructed. I mean, you've got knowingly distributes, knowingly solicits, knowingly possesses with intent to what I would offer, Mr. Chairman, is on line 24. I'll give the author time to get there. After the word knowingly, the defined term on line 13 through 16 is artificial intelligence system. My amendment would be, and I would welcome thoughts of members on this, but after the word knowingly, insert creates an artificial intelligence system, comma, so that the possessor with intent is criminalized by the existing bill. Those that solicit with intent are criminalized. Those that distribute with intent are criminalized. This would add creates an AI system with intent. So the creator of the system with intent and all that comes with that would also be criminalized. I don't know that it does that. As you can say, hey, the AI system did I created the system and I stepped back and I didn't distribute it, didn't solicit, didn't do any of that. I think it's not clear that that's criminalized. That's what I want to do.
Mr. Smith, do you want to weigh in on that proposed amendment?
I'm frantically running through 16, 12, 100, 100.1 and trying to go through that. Here's my biggest concern is that you're running up against the First Amendment. You're running up against someone who is legitimately doing this. And if you do, you're subjecting the potentiality of the statute being struck down in its entirety as being unconstitutional. So if you're going to do that, and I'm going to also look over at Mr. Higbee and make sure that I'm not saying this too incorrectly, but there needs to be some sort of, if possible, a provision in there for severability. to kind of carve out because
Mr. Higby Walker.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
I'm happy to be referred to by my colleagues.
He's still offended he hadn't heard what you said yet, but
Legislative counsel. And that's a better
It's
way.
always safe.
I apologize completely.
Mr. Scandalakis, thank you.
You
Here
stole
we
my
go.
line.
First one's up. This is a nice little donation. What does it say on the back of that dollar bill you just pulled out there?
I have no idea, and that probably.
Yeah, let's
probably
let's put that one back up. Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yes.
AI generated. All right, let's get ourselves back together. That was- Mr. Walker, bail us out.
The question as to severability, that is essentially implied in all of our legislation, and we don't have to provide for severability with each one of our pieces of legislation. Is that the question? Mr. Chairman, if I may ask, lines 27 through 31 include some conditions, including on line 31 was created through the use of an artificial intelligence system. So I'm just trying to quickly read how the amended language would work. But would it be, if you amended line 24 as suggested, depicting a child when he or she knowingly creates an artificial intelligence system that was created through the use of an artificial intelligence system? I assume that is not the intent of the proposed amendment, but I might need to take some time to try and work out that.
Why couldn't it just be creates?
Okay.
I'm asking, does that help at all? Does that make things worse?
It needs to be a two-step process because the mere creation, you then would be able to you'd be asking us to prosecute artists. You'd be asking us to prosecute professors and academics. You know, once again, these things are distasteful, but in some instances they are protected. And that's the thing is it's somebody who does something in the privacy of their own home. And once again, we're not talking about distributing at all. That's outside. We're solely talking about somebody who creates something. If they create this through a computer generated process, nobody else knows about it.
With an intent to distribute on line 25.
Solicits with intent to distribute, possesses with intent to distribute. This is creates with intent to distribute. That is not a free amendment speech thing when we're talking about the content we're talking about that's defined on lines 27 to 31. So I'm just trying to do our homework here. So to council's question, my amendment would be restated as after the word knowingly on line 24, add creates, comma.
All right, is there a second for the proposed amendment? For his amendment, yes. Second. Is there further discussion on the proposed amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. All right, any other amendments?
No, it's okay.
All right, back to the motion to pass by committee substitute as amended. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. Who's going to carry the bill in the Senate?
Senator Still.
Senator Still. All right, thank you. All right. We got ourselves back together. We're going to go slightly out of order. We're going to go down to House Bill 1172. I'll ask Representative Burchett. We are working off the version that passed the House, which is LC 550233S. A little change of topic. You haven't been here this session, have you? Did you come earlier?
I have not.
Yeah, it's been Why have you been here sooner this year?
Well, last time I sat before this esteemed committee, you took my gavel from me.
I remember that.
So
did you bring me a new gavel?
I did not.
Oh, okay.
I did not. It is in my office, though. If you ever need
You think
it.
somebody could go get it?
Yes.
Okay.
I can have that done.
All right. All right. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I bring before you House Bill 1172, as the chairman stated, LC 550233S. And many of you may remember Senate Bill 115, which passed the Senate and the House on sine die of last year. What this bill does in House Bill 1172 is seeks to remove language that is problematic for property owners and farmers in the ag community. The public trust doctrine is what I'm speaking of. It seeks to remove that language, but retain the underlying Senate Bill 115 purpose to preserve the right of fishermen, hunters, and those that will pass on navigable waterways, while at the same time preserving the property rights of our Georgians. One of the provisions that we added that came out of our study committee was in the last portion, we went up to the mountains and visited some trout streams, and we had a senator mention the fact that if up in the mountains, if someone were to be on the non-navigable waterways, which this doesn't pertain to, then you'd find yourself taking a trip to the train station. And so we're trying to avoid the trip to the train station. We're trying to avoid the shootings on our rivers and our navigable waterways. And if you recall, the instance that spurred Senate Bill 115 surrounded the Flint River, and there's actually someone that is serving time in a state penitentiary for shooting at a father and a son that were fishing on the river. So I think that was the impetus for Senate Bill 115, which was not my bill, but what we are trying to do is roll back some of the language that was in the bill and preserve the property rights that our Georgians hold so dear to them. And so we removed the public trust doctrine language and recited the right as only to fishing, hunting, and passage when someone owns a deed that is pre-1863, and that's what the bill does, Mr. Chairman, and I'll stand for questions. I expect that there's been a significant amount of conversation around this issue, and I anticipate several questions.
Senator Cowser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Whip, educate me just slightly on this public trust doctrine. Is that a statutory creation, common law? Exactly where did that come from? And
so, Chairman Cowser, it is a common law, and it for our state it's only been applied to the tidal waters. It's never been applied to our fresh waters, and this Senate Bill 115 was the first time that I know that was even recited in our statutes, and essentially to paraphrase what the public trust doctrine is, the state holds certain rights that the people that are the people's rights in trust for the people, and as applied here, the rights that the state held was the right to fish, hunt, and pass, and the problem with the public trust doctrine, to some of our friends that are in the ag business and the forestry business and the industries that utilize permits for discharge and removal of waters out of our streams, is that they see the public trust doctrine as a means for someone to bring action against them, to essentially say that the state holds these waters in the trust of the people, and therefore you don't have unlimited right to these waters. And so, because you're taking out water, we are going to sue you so that because those are our waters, or vice versa. If you're putting water back in, the water is too hot that you're putting back in, and so you're damaging the ecosystem or the stream. And so that was the concern that was brought to me, and many of you have heard from it from folks in your district, likely for the public removal of public trucks language, and that's what we've sought to do here.
So it was created at common law just for coastal waters.
As applied in Georgia, yes, sir.
And was in place for 100 years or something, and then we took it out? Or
we overlaid it to freshwater streams.
So we codified something that had been in common law, and now we're taking it out?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions from the committee? All right, that's all at this time. We have several people signed up to speak on the bill. We'll start with those opposed. Mike Worley with Georgia Wildlife Federation. You want to sit back there so they're not intimidated by you, Mr. Whip?
Sit here and breathe on me.
I know how he is, though. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and also I've referred to him as, I should refer to him as Mr. Whip, but I also refer to him as Mr. Chairman because he did a magnificent job of chairing this committee meeting that we, these committee meetings that we had over the course of the last year. I find myself in an awkward spot here trying to figure out which sheet of paper to sign on to for or against, and I suppose I'm going to speak in opposition, but I would like to first off introduce myself. Mike Worley. I'm with Georgia Wildlife Federation. I'm the president and CEO. And Georgia Wildlife Federation is the state's oldest and largest member-supported conservation organization. We were founded in 1936 in Macon, Georgia. The Senate Bill 115 was passed in order to the original problem, and I oftentimes hear in these situations or in testimony, what's the problem we're fixing? The problem we were fixing is that we had landowners that were asserting the right to exclude people from fishing on our navigable streams. That's the problem we were fixing. And Senate Bill 115 was proposed and passed and has done that. It became effective July 1st of last year. We've seen no great raft of lawsuits. People aren't getting tickets. Folks seem to be able to keep their property safe and protected in North Georgia on those streams. So we've seen no challenges associated with the passage of Senate Bill 115. Oftentimes we also hear that these lawsuits have been filed. We had one filed after the passage of Senate Bill 115, but prior to its becoming effective. Other than that, there are no lawsuits out there. Let's see here. I'm going to try and cut I'll leave you my written comments. I'll try and cut those really short because we've had a long evening already. Proponents of House Bill 1172 claim the public trust doctrine opens landowners up for lawsuits. Individuals under the public trust doctrine, as I understand it, are not allowed to sue individuals or corporations. The public trust doctrine is that the state holds these rights in trust for the public. So if a lawsuit is to be filed by a person or an individual or a group outside of here, it would have to be against the state to encourage the state to enforce its own laws and regulations. It's not been done here in Georgia. To my understanding, it would be a really poor way to enforce our environmental laws and regulations. What Senate Bill 115 does is protect the ability for people to hunt and fish and pass on these streams. The other part, and the reason I guess I'm here to speak in opposition is because the Senate, the Georgia Senate, and the Senate Natural Resources and the Environment Committee passed a very similar bill on the earlier this session, and that bill was passed unanimously from the Senate, and that's Senate Bill 542. It's a little bit clearer on the fact that people can actually enter the water and fish just as people would normally fish. That's not specifically included in this legislation, and for that reason I'm here to speak sort of in opposition to it, though I think it's implied in this legislation. It's not specifically stated here. So that's my concern on this particular bill. I do really appreciate the outstanding amount of effort and thought that Whip Burchett has put into this, and I think this is a doable bill. But I think the other bill, because it's clearer, is a better solution. So. With that, Mr. Chairman, I think I've completed my remarks. I'm glad to answer questions.
You do have a question for Senator Parent.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is the language in the other bill that you prefer? What is that language?
Let's see if I can. It specifically says. Oh heavens, I've got the wrong bill up. I've got this bill up. So, it specifically says that the word is that you are allowed to enter the water. And I'll see if I can call that up real quick while I apologize. But this bill doesn't specifically say you can enter. It says you can hunt and fish. And then it says and pass on these streams. And then it further says it's limited to hunting, fishing, and passing on these streams. I'm paraphrasing.
Inherent right to use for passage and hunting and fishing.
That's correct. In the Senate version, it says that as part of hunting, fishing, and passage, you can enter the water. And I will get to you that specific legislation.
So am I correct that you're concerned that in sort of fixing the issue created in the waning hours of last year's session, it goes too far back the other way?
Yes, ma'am, I believe it. It's not clear. Part of hunting and fishing let's just, can I give you an example? Would be, say, for example, people wade and fish. Just near here at the Chattahoochee River, you can enter on a publicly owned land. You could wade across the river, and if folks have asserted this right that they own to the center of the stream, you've crossed the center of the stream. You're on someone else's property. You're in the water. You're legally fishing. You have a fishing license and everything, but you could be excluded from that. That's my concern here. It says you can hunt and fish, but it doesn't clearly say that you can touch the bottom of the stream. The other bill does.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee for Mr. Worley? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Joe Cook with Georgia River Network. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak to this bill. I'm Joe Cook. I'm with Georgia River Network. We are the nonprofit organizations that runs the state water trails program in partnership with DNR. I want to speak to the underlying portion of this bill, and that is the definition of navigability. I appreciate Whip Burchett's hard work on this. We've had long conversations with him, and this is a very difficult issue. We, like Mike, who spoke before, are not speaking in opposition or in favor, but we do want to bring a couple of things to your attention. This effort to define which streams in the state or indeed navigable has proven to be kind of a legislative minefield. And if you look at the bill, really the key is how do we define navigability and what streams does this affect? And Whip Burchett introduced a bill earlier in the session to try to address where does 1172 apply? What streams does it apply to? And we're working from an 1863 definition of navigability to determine where we have the right to boat and fish and hunt in the 21st century. And that definition makes this job extremely difficult. And that's because we don't use our waterways today like we did in 1863. Commerce is taking place not on big rivers where boats loaded with freight are floating. It's taking place on the small streams where we have businesses renting canoes, kayaks, rafts, tubes to people. That's where we have commerce today. We have no commercial freight going on any of our streams, inland streams. So I just want to speak out and encourage the General Assembly to do what it has always done, which is determine what river uses are most important to the public now, what is the highest and best use of those rivers and streams, whether it meets the definition of the 1863 definition of navigability or not, determine what is the highest and best use of those streams, and protect those existing uses. And that's what we wanted to bring to y'all today.
All right, thank you. Next we have April Lipscomb from Southern Environmental Law Center. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is April Lipscomb. I'm an attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center, or SELC. If y'all aren't familiar with us, we are the largest nonprofit, nonpartisan environmental legal advocacy organization in the Southeast. My practice area focuses primarily on water quality and water management, and I have been looking at the issues surrounding navigable streams, public access, and the public trust doctrine for several years now. I presented at all of the study committee meetings that the House had this past October, and really do appreciate the work of the House Study Committee and the work that Whit Burchett has been doing to understand and further this issue. I am here, however, to urge the committee to take caution. In my opinion, there's really no need to take action on this legislation at this time, primarily because there is pending litigation that involves this particular language. So I think, as you heard already, shortly after Senate Bill 115 passed last year, another lawsuit was filed on the Flint River. So a landowner along the Flint has filed a lawsuit against the state of Georgia for a declaratory judgment that that landowner owns the bed of the Flint River, and because they own the bed of the Flint River, they can exclude the public from fishing. So that's the lawsuit. The complaint in that case also challenges the language in Senate Bill 115 that passed. The state of Georgia has also filed a motion to dismiss, relying in part on the language of Senate Bill 115. So the language that passed last year is the direct subject of a pending lawsuit right now. And meanwhile, the Georgia Court of Appeals, in a separate case, has recognized that the language in Senate Bill 115 supersedes some old case law concerning individuals' rights to exclude the public from navigable streams if they own the beds. So you have a lot of stuff sort of moving around right now. And if this bill passes, this will be the law that applies to that lawsuit. The general rule is that the law in effect at the time of the judgment is the law that applies unless the new law affects vested rights. And I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, but the Georgia Supreme Court just a few weeks ago issued a new opinion explaining that a little bit better and acknowledged that vested rights are only private rights, not public rights. Public rights include things like the public's right to navigate streams and public property. So those are things that this bill would apply to. This would be the law that applies. And so I would urge this committee not to pass legislation that would affect a pending lawsuit. I think that's probably just generally good policy. And let's let the courts decide what Senate Bill 115 means, and then we can figure out if there are changes that need to be made later, let's make them later. There's nothing on fire here. Nobody has sued anybody else for, violation of the public trust doctrine. I'll also just clarify, too, that Senate Bill 115 does not allow anybody to sue anybody else under the public trust doctrine. The we have to, the language in the statute itself has to include that private right in order for it to be one. And, it's very unlikely that anybody will try to, sue the state for issuing any kind of environmental challenge under the public trust doctrine, or that those types of challenges would be successful. So with that, I would urge you all not to pass this bill at this time, but wait and see if changes need to be made in the future. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
One of our attorneys has a question. Leader Gooch.
In training. Thank you for your comments. A couple questions. One is, what is your thoughts of navigable streams? How do you define that?
That is a very loaded question. So, there's the statutory definition, right? Which I probably could recite for you, but it's basically that the stream has to be capable of carrying boats loaded with freight during whole or part of the year. But the, rafting of timber or, transporting wood on small boats does not make a stream navigable. So there's not a lot of case law that interprets what that means. The cases that do look at navigable streams are pretty vague. The courts basically just make conclusory assertions, right? This stream is navigable versus this is not. So, as a lawyer, I think, I would argue, depending on the situation, whether a stream is navigable or not.
Do you think it's possible for a person to walk in a riverbed that's navigable? If a vessel can carry freight or commerce, is it feasible that a person could jump out of that boat and stand on the ground and walk on?
There are lots of boats that are capable of carrying commerce that have very little draft.
So commerce could be small volumes of goods.
That's my interpretation of it.
Okay. And if I may, I'd like to ask you another question. If a person owns the property, typically they own it to the center of the stream up in North Georgia. I'm not sure.
Non-navigable. Yes,
correct.
Sir.
So the lawsuit that you were referring to, someone was suing because someone was fishing on their property. Were they on the riverbed, standing on the riverbed, or were they floating through the property?
My understanding, so this is along the Flint River at Yellow Jacket Shoals, which is a very popular location for shoal bass fishing. So most people who fish there are wade fishing. There are people who are fishing from boats as well. So one of the arguments in that case is also whether or not the Flint River is navigable or non-navigable. So, that case will have to decide whether the river is a navigable river or a non-navigable river, and then if it is a navigable river, whether Senate Bill 115 allows the public to fish there.
So if someone owns the property, they have a deed to it, maybe they just purchased it a year ago, or they've had it in their family for 200 years, they've paid taxes on it, why do you feel they don't have a right to keep someone off their land? What gives another person a right to walk onto a piece of private property that they have no title to, they have no vested interest in, they've never paid taxes on that property? Why should a stranger be able to trespass onto someone else's private property and fish or hunt? I'm not clear. If you only own the land to the edge of the bank or where the vegetation rests, and they're out in the center of the river, who owns that land? That would be a different topic or a different discussion. But if I own the property to the center, or if I own both sides of the stream, why should I not be able to prohibit someone from walking through my land anytime I wanted to stop them?
So I agree that you should be able to do that if the stream is non-navigable, because under state law, people do own the beds underneath non-navigable streams. And this kind of gets back to some of the questions earlier about the public trust doctrine. The United States Supreme Court has recognized that every state in the country took ownership of the beds of all of their navigable rivers in trust for the public upon statehood under the public trust doctrine. So that is a United States Supreme Court recognized doctrine. And it only applies to navigable waters, which also includes tidewaters. So, and one of the principles behind the public trust doctrine is that once the state owns that property in trust for the public, those public rights cannot then be given away. So that means that if somebody else takes title to those public trust lands, they are taking that title subject to public rights. So the way I interpret that is that on navigable streams, the public has always had these public rights because the state had those rights in trust. If the state later deeded away some of that land to a private party, then under the public trust doctrine, the private party took that land subject to the public rights under the public trust doctrine. So it's also why the public trust language is important in Senate Bill 115, because it is widely recognized all over the country, really, as the best legal tool to protect public access to navigable, not non-navigable, but to navigable rivers. And I think some of the concerns that the agricultural community has about the public trust doctrine, in my opinion, they are kind of overblown. But if there's a need to address those concerns, those can be addressed through other amendments or through other measures, rather than just striking out this tool to protect public access, which is what is happening in this bill.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now the other side, Jake Tench with Georgia Agribusiness Council.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jake Tench, Georgia Agribusiness Council. First off, I want to thank Whit Burchett for his work on this bill and this issue and the study committee over the summer. I also want to thank Pro Tem Kennedy and Leader Gooch and the Senate for their work on this issue. We know that these issues are delicate, and we appreciate all the work on that. When it comes to agriculture, property rights and water rights are two of the most important issues that our industry faces. And obviously, dealing with this bill, we're thankful for the removal of the public trust doctrine because, as has been mentioned before, we do see that as an avenue for possible litigation and permit challenges for not only our members but the state as well. We recognize that there has been a lot of discussion on this topic, and we just appreciate all of it. And we're asking for your favorable consideration on House Bill 1172.
All right. Any questions from the committee? Thank you. We do have a question. Senator Hatchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my friend from Northeast Georgia, I appreciate your help throughout the offseason on getting some language together that we can all agree on that protects property rights. I know this has been a huge issue up in our neck of the woods, and you feel like we're in a good spot with this legislation?
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Senator. Thank you for all of your work and the wonderful district that you represent. Also, yes, we believe that this bill is necessary because after Senate Bill 115, we felt vulnerable as an industry, and we also saw vulnerabilities for the state. So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, no other questions. Last up, Adam Bellflower with Georgia Farm Bureau. Welcome.
Committee, Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me. My name is Adam Bellflower, and I'm with Georgia Farm Bureau. I'm not going to reiterate a lot of the points that have been said. Mr. Whip and my friend Jake Tench did a good job really covering a lot of the concerns for the agricultural industry. But just again, want to briefly say thank you to the Whip, thank you to the committee, and I know there's been a lot of buy-in on this issue from House and Senate leadership, and we really do appreciate it. The introduction of the public trust doctrine to navigable waters in the state of Georgia was a big concern of ours as an organization, and it was a big concern to a lot of our members. And some of my friends who've testified on the other side of this issue, they brought a good point. No, there has not been any current litigation citing the public trust doctrine in Georgia. And I do think a lot of that has to do and is a tribute to the fact that this bill, Senate Bill 115, passed just a few months ago. We haven't even been it hasn't even been a year since that piece of legislation passed. But we can look around the country and see a lot of concerns in other cases. There's cases in North Carolina where public trust has been cited. There's cases all across the country where public trust doctrine has been cited and permits have been sued. State issued permits have been sued. Therefore, the permit holder has had their permit revoked. And that is the concern of a lot of our members, is that their permits will be revoked and they'll no longer be able to utilize the water resources that are necessary for agriculture to remain successful. With that, that concludes my remarks. I would be happy to have answer any questions.
Are any questions from the committee? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all.
Mr. Whip, you want to close us out quickly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I do want to take a point of personal privilege and recognize that Leader Hatchett texted me. I just would look back immediately after session with grave concerns about the passage of Senate Bill 115. I will note, and Senate Bill 115, when it was passed, there was ongoing litigation. In fact, that was the reason or impetus that was brought to both chambers, that there was ongoing litigation that is going to impact the ability of our hunters and fisher and folks passing, that we must pass this piece of legislation. So I don't think that is a real concern. I do want to speak to two different points that were brought up. The language that is in the other version of the bill says not to the water, which is concerning to me, but the stream bed. It says, in such cases, the public's rights limit to entering upon the stream beds held by a valid grant. And my concern with that is this whole issue is the concern I have is takings. And if we are giving an explicit right to walk on somebody's stream bed that they own with a valid grant pre-1863, I think that's the first time in statute we would put a statutory right to trespass on somebody's property. If we take that same stream bed, move it up the hill, and put it on the hill and say, well, in this instance, you have the right to cross my land, and I don't, to the leader's point, that's not something that I think this body wants to support. So that is my only concern with the language. And then the concern was raised about changing the definition of navigability. During our travels across the state, one of the things that the committee sort of held to was that we don't want to change the definition of navigability because it does lend itself to two different scenarios. As I read the Itchaway case, the court reasoned if you want to determine a water navigable, then you have two ways to do it. You can either cite to historical data that shows that there was commerce either in whole or in part of the year, and commerce of the time in 1863 is not going to look like a big barge. It's going to look like a small craft transporting cotton, peanuts, furs, or whatever. And then the other way they reasoned was that you could also determine it by today's standards, and the smallest barge was something like 34 foot by 24 foot with a 7-foot draft. So those were two different ways you could determine navigability, either by historical data or by today's standards. And so I think that the 1863 language allows flexibility to say some of these waters are navigable by the terms of 1863, and some of these waters are navigable by today's standards, which gives our fishermen, hunters, and our passage folks the ability to travel on some of these waters that you couldn't put a barge on. So with those points, I just I really appreciate the offline work that everybody on this committee has done, and I appreciate your hearing my bill, and I hope that we can get a due pass.
If I remember right, the bill we passed last year, I think we first saw in the Senate late on day 40 for the first time. When did y'all see it first in the House?
Late on day 40.
There was
midnight, I think, is when we saw the bill.
And there was a pending case that bill was responding to at the time. Is that right?
That is true. That was the necessity to get the bill done so quickly. And
how long did you study this issue?
Well, I became I'm not going to say I'm an expert. I'm not an expert in many things, but we started. So prior to this bill being passed, a member from that area brought a study committee to address the issue that was happening there, and the study committee was to talk about navigable streams. Lo and behold, this bill passed. So the need for the study committee sort of broadened and was much more important. So we constituted the study committee, and we traveled the state in the month of October from North Georgia to South Georgia and in between. And Leader Hatchett had 250 people in attendance and nervous about the expansion of the right of the public to go on the non-navigable waterways. Up in Leader Gooch's district, at least 150 folks were there, concerned about the trout rivers. Down in South Georgia at the Flint, we were literally in a barn packed out with people. I couldn't even count the number of folks. This is a very, very emotionally driven issue. People are very protective of their rights, particularly their property rights, as they should be. So we are trying to thread the needle here the best we can while protecting property rights, while also recognizing the ability for folks to recreate on these rivers.
All right. You have a question from Senator Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's actually when you mentioned that there was a lawsuit last year. So I'm hoping you can clarify for me. I remember there being just like a huge kerfuffle on like Sunny Die last year.
Well, it was a kerfuffle for us.
It was like this big kerfuffle, and all of a sudden it was like, but so what I was told, and that's why I'm trying to get some clarity, but I remember very distinctly that the word was, the Attorney General is settling a lawsuit, and the settlement is going to cause all these problems. So now we have to pass this. Is that correct, or was it just an ongoing lawsuit?
It was an ongoing lawsuit. I don't think the consent judgment had been signed yet.
But it was in progress.
I think you're right.
So it was not just an open-ended lawsuit that was not heading towards a resolution. Like, there was a consent judgment.
That is my understanding at the time.
That was mine too. So that's why I wanted to clarify, because that's somewhat differently situated.
Yep.
Thank you.
You have a question from Senator Setzler.
To the whip, appreciate this. To clarify for myself, based on all we've heard today, passage of this bill allows a greater property right for adjacent landowners on navigable streams, and expands a little bit the ability to clarify folks on non-navigable streams to still be able to pass through for fishing and hunting purposes and thoroughfares. Is that correct?
No, sir. This bill doesn't address non-navigable streams in any manner. Only navigable streams, and it put guardrails up, and specifically on lines 24 and 25. Well, let me make sure I'm right. Yeah, 24 and 25 saying there's no trespass right in this bill.
I get that. Does it change in any way or clarify the definition of navigable versus non-navigable, or does it state that all stays the same?
That all stays the same.
Thank you.
All right. That's everybody. It's time to speak on the bill. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Move to pass.
Motion to pass. Senator Cowser, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Senator Kennedy. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All opposed? 3. The motion carries. Who is carrying the bill in the Senate?
I have a floor leader hoping to carry the bill. Still working through that.
Leader Hatchett. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We're going to go down to House Bill 1409. Chairman Leverett, give us a second to find the bill. Since it's your first bill in the Judiciary Committee, we'll go ahead and let you go next. We are working off a committee substitute, LC 339718S. And once I finish you, I think everybody I promised could go first, so we've gotten to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's so good to be back here. I missed you while I was gone. Appreciate the opportunity to be back here again. and especially, Mr. Chairman, appreciate you scheduling all my bills so far. So House Bill 1409 is a bill that tries to address the provision of mental health care services in the state, much in the way we have done so for ER services and OBGYN services by providing a slightly higher standard of fault. If you look at Section 1 on the very first page, it sort of states what the issue is. There's a crisis affecting provision and quality of mental health care services in the state, and the providers or the employers of these providers are having difficulty in employing them, partly due to liability exposure. So we're concerned that we're going to either lose the existing providers or that we will at least have difficulty in increasing the providers we have. And of course, you can have all the programs and parity and everything you want, but if you don't have the professionals to provide the service, you can't provide services of mental health to Georgians. So what we do in here, again, is much the same approach we took with the ER and OBGYN, that statute, which is actually would appear just about 5 or 6 code sections before where this is proposed to be inserted. I would say the meat of the bill is on the final page, on page 5, on lines 92 through 94. It says, an action that involves mental health care liability claims, no provider will be held liable unless it's proven that the mental health care provider's actions showed gross negligence. So it's the same sort of thing we do for ER and OBGYN doctors. There's a proposed jury instruction there, tracking the text of the other statute. We do have a provision about punitive damages there that removes a few of the bases of punitive damages. That's Section D in lines 103 through 106. And then we also provide that it only applies to causes of action that accrue after July 1 of this year. So it's not intended to affect any existing claim or case that's pending. Much of the details of the bill are sorted through in the definitions. And so you'll notice up in Section B, we have the term mental health care liability claim and mental health care provider. Those are both defined terms in the proposed statute. The provider is basically a mental health care professional or a mental health care facility. Those terms are also defined. Professional, I think, would largely include the different kinds of medical disciplines you would expect. That's defined lines 69 through 84. The one that is, I think, of note is foster care parent, trained by a contracted child placement agency to coordinate mental health care services. They would be entitled to the same liability protection. And a provider means just the professional or the facility or someone that provides management or administrative services to a provider or facility. And then the facility is, that definition also has about 4 or 5 different potential facilities that could qualify, but they've got to be open continuously and have either a hospital affiliation agreement or some kind of admitting privileges. The idea is we want the places to be entitled to this protection to have some kind of arrangement with just a medical facility that can address more like physical medical needs as opposed to mental health care. And the term mental health care liability claim is limited by the concept of the claimant is an inpatient. So you have to be in some kind of inpatient care, and that's also defined as well. Again, this is somewhat surgical. It's intended, though, to try to encourage facilities or professionals that provide this kind of round-the-clock care where they're, just like an acute hospital, they're admitting and treating people who walk in. And so we're trying to address that. Plus, there's a provision that has to do with contracted providers of DHS who are basically helping foster children and providing services to them. So we believe this is a very much needed piece of legislation to avoid the claims and a lot of the litigation that scares folks away in this space, and to keep the ones that we currently have. So that's basically the sort of the mile-high view at 90 miles an hour. Mr. Chairman, I know the hour's late, but I'll be glad to answer any questions any of the committee members may have.
All right, any questions from the committee for the author? Senator Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much, Representative Leverett. I just have Well, first of all, this, when you look at 73 through 83, it really does kind of leap out at me as sort of a, like, one of these things is not like the other, right? I mean, I don't really understand the placement of foster care parent, even if trained by a child placement agency as a mental health care professional along with all of these others, just because it's clearly a big outlier. Can you explain that?
Well, I think I can. I mean, I think the idea is the foster care parents who are willing to help, they get engaged with children that have mental health issues. They are engaged in providing mental health care services. They get trained on doing that. And so we want to include them in that same category. So we're trying to make sure we encourage them. That provision, along with a few other provisions in here that relate to the contracted providers, are basically trying to avoid the hoteling, which we've heard a good bit about, and make sure we encourage the provision of services in more of a therapeutic setting.
Sure. I mean, but are they like certified or licensed in any way?
Well, I think if they are trained by a contracted child placement agency to coordinate mental health care services, they would receive some training because it is required in the language of the text. I don't know that they receive a certification. And I think some of the other witnesses who are going to testify to the bill may be able to address that question in a little more detail.
Well, if you don't, thank you. And I look forward to that. And I do have one more, if you indulge me, Mr. Chairman, and bill sponsor. So, okay, I was just looking at, all right, you've got a couple carve-outs. 66. So it does not apply when there's a cause of action for injuries arising from criminal acts resulting from negligent hiring or retention.
Yes, ma'am.
So it has been pointed out to me, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on, was there any thought to including negligent supervision? Because I've been looking at a couple cases where the issue, in this case from a behavioral health center in 2012, where essentially they were understaffed, the employee wasn't properly supervised, and then he essentially was raping a 15-year-old girl, and then there was a $60 million jury verdict, But the point being that you don't want to eliminate the responsibility to supervise. I mean, huge verdict, that may be an issue and part of what you're trying to address, but at the same time, I don't think we want to green light, not appropriately supervising staff in facilities like these where there could be access to children that are going through behavioral and mental health crises. And so if it's just, retention and hiring, but you don't have supervision, then these things, the lawsuit would not be able to be brought, and that does seem like it could be an important part of accountability.
Well, and I think I agree with you. I suppose I would say that the negligent hiring or retention, that could be a route here to get back to the regular negligence standard in that case. I don't know the facts of that case. But we are, I think, generally including supervision to be, if it's within an inpatient facility and you meet all the other requirements or guardrails of the statute, that would be subject to the gross negligence standard. But I also wonder if you might not be able to show gross negligence in a case like that. That seems like a pretty egregious set of circumstances.
Well, I think they were short-staffed, and they typically only had a man supervise the men's wing, but they assigned him and another woman, but they just didn't have the proper controls, and so the man was busy raping the 15-year-old, and the female staffer left early because they didn't have the proper controls in place to have them clock in and clock out. It's a 2012 case out of Kennesaw, Cobb County, Devereaux, a behavioral health facility in Kennesaw. Just making sure there weren't, would you be amenable to supervision? I mean, it sounds like you're kind of okay with that, or you're saying it's captured within retention. But if it were the first time it happened, because of not having the proper controls in place, how would that fall into retention?
Well, I would think it might. Well, of course, I don't know the facts of
sure,
the
of
case,
course,
and you would need to know more facts.
And I haven't read the whole thing either, but yeah.
But I would just say that if someone's engaging in that kind of conduct, I wonder if that's the first time it ever happened, and you might have a negligent hiring or retention claim there that the statute would permit you to pursue with the regular negligence standard. I also think, again, we're not granting them civil immunity. We're just raising the standard or lowering it, however you want to view it, from regular negligence to gross negligence. My understanding is that is the sort of the supervision that goes on within the facility is one of the types of claims to which the statute would apply if the facility and the provider are subject to the limitations in the statute. It could be that some situations or the facts of the situation you're describing wouldn't meet these guardrails here because that it's got to be a short-term or long-term stay due to substantial risk of harm to themselves or others, et cetera, all the definitions of inpatient on page 2. And as to whether I would be amenable to it, I would ask that we not make any changes because this particular bill is the result of some negotiation and discussion between different actors and the pertinent businesses, and we'd rather not upset the sort of the delicate balance we've tried to strike here by allowing for some additional liability limitations within a certain narrow sphere as a way to encourage the provision of the service. I agree we don't want people doing things like that, but we do want the good folks out there to stay and to come into Georgia and provide the service.
Dr. Watson.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate you bringing this legislation. I think it's excellent. The only, I had a question relating to, it lists a lot of folks who are considered mental health professionals and providers, and but I just recall back when I was going to the hospital getting consults as a primary care internal medicine doc, geriatric, getting consults to help care for patients inpatient-wise. And as a resident, that's a common occurrence in a teaching hospital for the internal medicine or other folks to go down in the psychiatric unit to help care for patients like that, whether it's catatonia, schizophrenia, where they need hydration or whatever, and it's a little bit beyond the realm of the psychiatrist. And yet you're still hampered the same way the mental health care professionals are by not being able to obtain a good history and sometimes not even a good physical, at times. So I wondered about other professionals besides what you have listed there. Maybe there's some section in here I missed.
Offhand, I don't believe there is. I think it's limited to provision of mental health care services. It doesn't include things beyond that. I appreciate the concern, though, and I would be happy to discuss with the chairman filing a bill to do that at some point. But I think at this point we're just trying to encourage the provision of the mental health care services because those are the ones where I think more of the liability concerns are present.
Okay.
And I think some of the other witnesses can probably give you a better real world perspective than I can because that's not what I do for my day job.
Senator Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the author. I want to support this effort. I just wanted to say to everybody, this is a very delicate issue. It makes me nervous. I just want to say for the record, the providers out there that are going to be able to provide services under this framework understand there's concern among the legislators that creating this gross negligence standard lowers the expectation, lowers the duty to these very fragile people. And I know that's not the author's intention. There's been a very delicate balance struck by a lot of people in this. I just want to express for the citizens of Georgia concern. You lower the bar, are we lowering the expectation we have to care for folks in very difficult circumstances? I have that concern. I'm going to support your bill, but I want to share that with you, and it's something we need to be very careful about moving forward.
May I address that, Mr. Chairman? I share the concern. And I appreciate your comment. I think, though, when you talk to people who provide services in the space, they don't change what they do because of a statute that that changes a standard of care or a standard of fault, other than that they're more willing to provide service in the state than they would be otherwise. But I appreciate your concern very much.
All right, those are all the questions from the committee. We have two people signed up to speak on the bill. I think they're probably together. Ms. Sally Perry. Mr. John Bozeman, would you like to come up as well? Mr. Bozeman, are you an attorney?
Per se attorney.
Okay.
Thank you. Obviously not, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, thank you so much for your time. But this is a meaningful bill to me personally, as well as our client. I want to introduce Sally Perry, who's the CEO of Coastal Hospital, has a number of hospitals in Georgia that she's got responsibility for. Late hour, I'll be as brief as possible. Essentially, I just want to say this has been many hours of negotiation and work to try to come up with a balance here, right? So the balance is, Senator Setzler, you're saying we want to make sure we have care, right? We certainly don't want the healthcare providers to be participating in defensive medicine, right? Which is what's going on right now. What we really are trying to do is open up access to beds, open up access to care. We've even said, while her hospitals are protected by CON, go ahead, waive off those protections if it means more beds, couple it with tort reform, or some kind of litigation relief like we have here, because I don't want her leaving the state, right? We talk about foster care. That is a good catch, Senator. The reason that's in there, and there's language that was put in there and working with the department, because her facilities offer a program to help keep kids out of hotels. And those are kids with strong mental health issues, severe mental health issues, and the training that she provides and the work she provides to recruit these parents is really difficult. That's why they were included here too. This was reflective of another measure of current law, which allows OBs and ERs that higher standard, but it's light, right? We don't even get that in this, right? So the trial bar has given, no doubt about it. This is not everything we want. And when you're treating mental health, it's a treatment. Georgia has a mental health issue. This is part of the treatment. This is not the answer. And this doesn't go far enough, in my opinion, because there's such a lack of access. The state of Georgia has so few beds. They have become her responsibility in her hospitals because we've closed so many hospitals. And she's become the public safety net. The short staffing issue, that is part of the reason we're doing this. How do you find staff? How do you find psychiatrists? How do you find healthcare professionals to do this when they're dealing with a population that comes into their hospitals to do harm to themselves or others? This is a very, very important bill for the state of Georgia, and it's a good balance. And I would certainly ask the committee to give it thorough consideration, but I would like for Sally to say a few words, if you would.
Hey, everybody, and thank you for your time. I'll be quick. Just in the line of work that we're talking about here, to me, it's really a mental health parity issue in that it was not included with the EDs and the OBs to begin with. The patients that we take in are in the same level of crisis. We don't know their medical comorbidities. We don't know their legal comorbidities. We don't know their social issues that they have going on, and we bring them into our healthcare systems and with our healthcare providers to assure the safety of them in the community. And we assume that liability. And so we really need some level of protection. This started when there was serious discussion about whether or not we could continue providing services in Georgia. And specifically with one of our programs, there were some moves made to stop that. And that was very scary for me as someone who was born and bred in Georgia and has always worked in this field. And if there's something serious that happens, absolutely, we should be held accountable to that. And to the person who does that. But we do need some protections in that we take in the unknown to ensure safety, and we can't always predict what's going to happen. So I just ask that you guys really consider that and hope to have your support.
All right, thank you, Ms. Perry, Mr. Bozeman. Any questions from the committee? All right, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Move to pass.
Move to pass by committee substitute from Senator Setzler. Do we have a second? Second from Senator Hodges. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. We have 4. All opposed? 2, and the motion carries. Who is going to be carrying the bill?
Chairman, I hope you would consider carrying the bill.
I know Tort Reform Tillery might want to do it, but I'll fill in for him instead then. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your work on this. All right. Going back on the... Thank you. Bring us another bill sometime. I know you do. Going back to the agenda on the home stretch, House Bill 1022. Chairman Saines, working off a committee substitute. Thank you. We are working off LC 560190S. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring back to the committee something that should look familiar. It originated from this committee as Senate Bill 360 2 years ago, Colton's Law, brought by then Senator Sheila McNeil. We have taken that intent, which was to look at an exploitation issue of a disabled minor, modify the code section to put it within cruelty to children. The bill, I'll go through kind of what the bill does. Lines 12 through 24 just define what a disabled minor would be. And then starting on line 53, it modifies the first and second degree of cruelty to children when it involves a disabled minor, and modifies the first degree for 5 to 20 years to 15 to 30, and the second degree from 1 to 10 to 10 to 20 years, with a big distinction that we make it very clear that this is not a mandatory minimum. At the discretion of the judge, you'll see that language at 59 through 64. And that is the summary of the bill.
Any questions for the author? All right, no one's signed to speak on the bill. What's the pleasure of the committee? Motion to pass by committee substitute from Senator Hodges, a second from Senator Hatchett. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. Who's going to carry the bill?
Senator Watson, I believe, if he's all right with it.
All right, Dr. Watson it is. Thank you. Next bill on the agenda, House Bill 1099, Representative Huddleston. Come on up. We are working off the version you passed in the House, LC 481121.
That is correct, Mr.
All right,
Chairman.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the members of the committee. Yes, I'll be speaking on House Bill 1099. What we're looking at doing is adding some language to an existing code to allow property owners to mark their property lines with purple paint markings. A lot of times you'll see property owners mark their property lines with signs. This just gives another method of availability. Lines 28 through 38 gives kind of the method of being used basically within the purple paint marks. It's minimum 1 inch wide, 8 inch high, 3 to 5 feet off the ground. Basically, there's 22 other states that actually has the same or similar language. Like I said, Georgia is the only southeastern state that's not doing it, so this would be consistent among the southeast. And like I said, with that, I'll take with any questions.
All right, any questions for the author? Representative Setzler. Senator Setzler, it's getting late.
That's the answer to both. I still use that myself sometimes. I'm going to raise some concerns. I want to be a nice guy. I don't want to be mean. When I read this came 10 years ago, and it's come back every couple of years. If I'm walking through the woods and I find myself on the opposite side of these these trees that are painted with purple paint, what this bill says is, by virtue of having crossed that threshold, I've per se committed criminal trespass.
And the way I understand it, I think pretty much, like I said, within a property owner, no different than putting them up with signs, allows them to do the purple paint. And with me, just kind of common sense, like I said, I think most time an individual would actually know if they're on a person's property or not. That's just kind of how I see there. So I think when it comes to criminal trespass, I think, that would have to go back within law of the existing code. But I think, like I said, basically, you might have trespass or you might have criminal trespass with damages. But I know within the DNR, pretty much, I think, if it's just accidentally, then I think there's a transition period, number one, of educating them, but then I think some leniency too. And that's just kind of my point. Yeah.
I don't want to be the bad guy here. I'm just this is law we're talking about. This is criminal law we're talking about. What
Yes,
this
sir.
does is it creates a duty for me. If I'm a citizen from, you name the place, whether it's Georgia, say I'm from Georgia. I mean, it'd be easy to say from out of state where this isn't the law. That'd be an easy fact pattern for me to show how this is a problem. Even if I'm from Georgia and I'm hunting on my friends, I go down to one of my friends' farms. There's they've got 5,000 acres of pine trees. I'm out hunting hog or deer, and I'm walking along, and I pass these trees. I don't know where his property line is. I don't have a duty to know where his property line is. If I see posted no trespassing in a fence, or I see signs that says no trespassing beyond this point, this is private property, that's clear what that means. What this bill says is, if I pass that line, I've committed trespassing. This creates a duty for me as an adult, or a 16-year-old with a hunting license, 17-year-old with a hunting license. Walking through the woods, it creates a duty for me to know that I see purple paint, I cross that paint, I have committed criminal trespass by virtue of that, as if I had been warned by the landowner, don't cross this line.
Right, and I think, like I said, a lot of times when I talk with the DNR, I think that gives them an opportunity with this language in there because, like I said, with the signs, I had been told basically, even with the signs, being that it's not within this language, that basically a DNR law enforcement officer would just have to give a warning. So they were in favor of it and spoke of it, basically it gives them, like I said, that opportunity to make aware, but I think we would have to educate the public to where they would understand what purple paint means just as in signs, because like I said, within all these other states of the similar and same language. And how it come forth was some property owners, basically pecan growers, and yes sir, you're correct. I think this come up in 2017 on the Senate side, and it passed, but I guess ran out of time on the House side. But I had a pecan grower pretty much come up and request of the signs being removed, and I guess individuals coming on and getting the pecans, and he's actually the one that he and I had a conversation with the purple paint. Number one, it's more economically feasible for the paint, and it's actually they claim it's more visible. So
yes, sir.
But I appreciate your yes, sir.
Listen, I want to welcome you to this committee. I wish our first encounter is not over an issue over which we disagree. It happened to come to the House, and I was a subcommittee chairman in House Duty Non-Civil, and it stopped for substantive reasons because it, in fact, I mean, I know our DNR officers are good folks. They're not looking to harm people. They're not looking to swat people with a trespassing offense and throw them in the slammer. But what this bill does, it creates a per se criminal trespass. Heck, if I'm wandering through the woods and I see blue paint on trees, I don't know if I'm on the proper side of it or the improper side of it. I mean, there's no thing that says trespassing is this way, not trespassing is that way. There's so much ambiguity to this to create a duty for someone to know this. This was stopped in the House for that reason. It wasn't because it ran out of time. It was that there was just very serious concerns. So I'm sorry, that was my first encounter with this here in the legislature. I just have deep concerns, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the committee? Senator Hatchett.
I got a quick question. I guess on line 18, it says, or if you start with 16, a person commits the offense of criminal trespass when he or she knowingly and without authority enters upon the land or premises of another person. And then it also says and it talks about vehicles. And then I guess we create section 4 that says enters upon the land or premises of another person that has been marked by the placement of identifying purple paint marks. If it's already criminal trespass to enter upon the land or premises of another person, why do we need purple paint marks?
I think, look, it goes back to basically, it just gives another method of marking property lines, either by signs and or purple paint. And like I said, it's more economically feasible, but it's actually a known fact that it's more visible. And like I said, I've talked with a number of folks that's very aware of it within all the other states that's already attempting to
I think it provides the knowingly part. It makes it where you would know that it was someone else's land. I think that's a little different offense than just entering knowingly on land of somebody else. You'd enter a land that has now been marked, and that would in itself be enough to know. Mr. Walker, do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paragraph 1 also requires that that happen for an unlawful purpose. Whereas in paragraph 4, there is no unlawful purpose language. It would just be a status offense, essentially.
And then, if I can, Mr. Chairman, is there a provision about no trespassing signs, or is it only going to be purple paint?
Basically, when it was on, I guess, non-civil on the house side, we actually did start out by using signs and or purple paint, and I guess they amended it within non-civil, not have signs in.
So if I can, if I have no trespassing signs everywhere and somebody comes onto my land, it's technically not an offense of criminal trespass, but if I use purple paint,
well,
it's criminal trespass.
Yes, sir. Now, that was one reason that it was requested for signs and or purple paint, because basically, like I said, within DNR, they said if they go out and it's basically just sign, it's basically just a warning the first time. But by them adding the language to the existing code, it would give them, I guess, a foot to stand on to be able to enforce it.
Mr. Walker?
Line 22, Senator, does refer to notice from the owner, so that could be construed to include notice by sign.
Okay.
And that may have been why that non-civil, when they may have took it out on the front end.
And notice from the owner, could it be purple paint?
Could be blue paint.
Could it be blue paint?
There's actually other states that does, in the North New England states do have, I believe one I read was orange, but it's actual paint markings.
Dr. Watson, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I just a little bit disappointed. I mean, so if a landowner has all these signs, I mean, unless the notice from the owner up in line 22, I mean, it seems a little bit conflicted there. If you took the sign and or purple paint out.
I think basically, like I said, I think it would give a choice to signs and or paint, but I think some of the ones, like I said, the property owners I'd spoke with, I think it's gotten very costly, large landowners, or like you said, the ones that's being removed and having to replace them. So this just gives them another method.
All right, Senator Setzler.
So the concern here is that a landowner that owns 7,000 acres of pine trees wants to conserve money and only use paint instead of placards. And in exchange for the owner of 7,000 acres of pine trees, which probably has a harvesting plan, and they every 15 years, to save them money from signs, they use paint, and instead the hunter's going to expose himself to criminal trespass by walking across that purple threshold. That's my concern as we weigh these things. I'm not indifferent to the cost of operation of someone that owns 7,000 acres of pine trees. I'm just trying to weigh that against some poor schlep who walks across the line and committed criminal trespass.
And I think there's a transition period of, like I said, of education. We've got to educate the public. And I think through a number of organizations allows to educate them, to be aware. Just like I said, there's 22 other states and 16 with the same language. I think an additional 6 with some similar.
All right, those are all the questions from the committee. We do have one person signed up to speak on the bill, Adam Bellflower with Georgia Farm Bureau.
Thank
you. Welcome back.
Thank y'all for having me back. Like I said earlier, my name is Adam Bellflower with Georgia Farm Bureau. This is a discussion we were engaged in back in 2017 when it came up. as was previously stated, our landowners, our members, they see it as a way, just an alternative method to no trespassing signs, to use the purple paint boundary markers. I have heard the discussion, understand the concerns. To our knowledge and to my understanding, purple paint would now be a way to let someone who is wandering through the woods or someone who is out hunting, it would give them a way of notice of showing this is a property boundary. There is some designated marker, an alternative method to no trespassing signs. But just wanted to come up and voice our support for the legislation, and thank y'all for considering it.
So the intent would be purple paint could be the same as a sign.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And a sign doesn't, in itself, does not create a criminal offense. It would, I guess, you'd have to enter. Well, looking at lines 20 through 23. You got to prove the person had notice. So I guess a sign in itself is not always enough. It would be, I guess, evidence of notice. Because the way this is written, the purple paint's a little bigger than that. It creates the offense in itself, right? Any questions from the committee? All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You want to come back up? I wonder if you, reading the committee, I don't know if you're getting some skeptical looks, if you would have more success in getting the bill moved if in essence the paint could serve the same function as the sign would function, so someone could still put the paint up, but it's not necessarily per se criminal trespass. I don't know, just a thought, but do you have anything else you want to add?
No, sir. I was going to say on the front end, we like I said, had language in there with signs and or paint when we talked with the DNR, and I guess, like I said, non-civil remove the signs, and that may have been some of the existing language within the bill or within the code section.
Dr. Watson?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I think going back to the original language or those thoughts relating to, because if you're telling me that the purple paint's more, it makes it more of a misdemeanor, easier to charge someone with a misdemeanor than signs, I mean, and you're not including the signs. I mean, so all the landowners, I get it, the signs may be stolen, but a lot of landowners still have a lot of signs out there.
Correct.
Might be, unless somebody on the committee wants to go a different direction, it might be better if you try to work on some additional language prior to our last hearing in the event you get buy-in from the committee to still move it. We'll have one more hearing on Wednesday. If you were able to get enough support in the committee with some additional language, if you want to do that, or you go a different direction with it, of course.
No, sure. I mean, I'm here to y'all's discretion. I mean, y'all the experts.
Okay. Did you have something, Senator Hodges? Okay.
I was just wondering.
Turn your mic on. You might as well wonder out loud like I'm doing.
Might as well. How are people going to know? I mean, I can read trespassing. I know what that means, but I mean, who's going to know what purple paint means?
That's what I said. Basically, within the organizations, there would be a transition period, I would think, of having to educate the public.
Who does that?
I think pretty
Who
much.
Who pays for it?
Well, I just think in general, within just the general organizations, by word of mouth. But then, like I said, I imagine through Farm Bureau or others may do some publications possibly there. But, you know, I think there would be a transition period of education.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you. We'll hold on taking action this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda, House Bill 1255. Representative Jones, come on up. We were working off the version you did in the House, which is LC 481179.
That's correct.
All right. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I have HB 1255, and that's stated LC 481179. And seated with me is Vincent Terry to answer any questions that you may have. And you should have a letter in your folder explaining their support for this bill. And the current statute in 1255 does not make it clear who makes the request for transcripts. In some courts, like Fulton County, the request is made with the judge's staff attorneys or staff members. In DeKalb County, the clerk of court makes the request as a courtesy to the appellant. In Talbot County, the clerk uses another method. Then the clerk orders the transcript. This has posed a problem in the past. And with this small change, it will allow the process to be the same in all of the courts in Georgia and provide a clear direction in causing the transcripts to be produced. And with that, Mr. Chair, I ask for the committee's favorable vote on this.
All right, so when a notice of appeal is done now, you'll just have to include in the notice that you request the transcripts from the court reporter. That's basically for someone filing the notice, a new obligation.
That's
All right.
correct, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions from the committee? All right, no one's signed to speak on the bill. What's the pleasure of the committee? Motion to pass. Senator Jones, is there a second? Second for Senator Parent. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. And who's going to carry the bill in the Senate?
Senator Cowser.
Senator Cowser. All right. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. House Bill 1283, Representative Persinger. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I'll do my best to be brief. House Bill 1283, LC 48-1099. This is just a housekeeping bill aimed at creating consistency between the Class A and Class B designated felonies definitions in regards to aggravated assault within with a deadly weapon within the juvenile code. So the Class B designated felony definition does not exclude a firearm as a deadly weapon, but the Class A designated felony definition does. So this bill just asked or proposes to strike, provided that such deadly weapon is not a firearm, from the Class A designated felony definition.
Was there a particular case that caused this to be in question, or someone that requested it?
Actually, Joseph McKinnon, Assistant District Attorney out of the Southern, up for juvenile court in the Southern Judicial District, sent this to us, I think, late last year.
All right. Any questions from the committee? No one signed to speak on the bill. It's the pleasure of the committee. Motion to pass. Senator Hatchett, do we have a second? Second from Senator Jones. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. And who's carrying the bill in the Senate?
Senator Dixon.
Dixon. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, House Bill 1292, Representative Okoye. Come on up. We are working off a committee substitute, LC 550293S.
That is correct.
All right, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my first time here.
Welcome. Did you think you'd ever come up here and get called to present your bill? It's been a long one.
Well, all I want to do is get it passed.
There you go. Good answer.
But this bill, Mr. Chairman, is to help stop what has been happening lately, where people sell other people's homes fraudulently, and your American dream is just taken away. So this bill is just to require that you present identification when you record deeds, because currently it's an honor system where you go in, you can record a deed, and you don't have to present any ID. So this is asking that you present IDs so that it will be identified in case there's fraud. Right now, if you lose your house fraudulently, it's difficult to get it back because you have to prove who you are. And that's difficult to do because the seller already claim your identity. And so this bill is to help Georgians stay in their homes. I'm open to questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I know we have a substitute with another issue on it. I think someone else is going to address.
Yes.
Any questions for the author on his portion of the bill? All right, thank you. We'll have Miss Betsy Bradfield come up from Georgia Realtors. And I believe Senator Goodman's bill, I forget the bill number now, you'll tell us, was added to this. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Betsy Bradfield, Georgia Association of Realtors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I know it's late, and thank you, Representative Okoye, for all of your work on this bill. This does have a part of Senate Bill 474. It begins on line 186. And that is the language that if you're going to send a monetary solicitation and an offer to buy someone's property or land, you now have to include these sentences starting on line 192. The reason that we are addressing this issue is because you have a lot of landowners who are getting these solicitations, and if you flip it over to the back, it'll be a purchase agreement, and they're usually targeting elderly individuals or individuals who are low income. You have some cases where they're targeting mentally incapacitated individuals. And what's happening is some people think that the offer for $10,000 is a fair amount for their property, so they sign the purchase agreement. Maybe they're down on finances, and they end up selling their land, and it turns out that the fair market value of their property is more like $200,000, $300,000. There was a situation where there was a woman in Southwest Georgia who sold over 200 acres of land on this purchase agreement. And right now, there's no real recourse for these individuals to get their land back if they feel that they were scammed in this way. So this just allows them, as you'll see in line 205 and 206, for the potential for damages sustained and for them to cancel that instrument. But the underlying bill, as Representative Okoye mentioned, it does target that predatory real estate practice that has popped up over this past year of people filing false quitclaim deeds, usually sending them in the mail. And the property owner right now has absolutely no idea that this is happening until it's too late and they find out that their land has been transferred to someone else. It's a huge problem. It's a problem that is technically illegal, but it is somehow not illegal enough, as it seems. It feels like we play a game of whack-a-mole in the real estate world. Every real estate scam, we whack-a-mole, 3 more pop up. So right now there's no real recourse, and a lot of these individuals cannot afford to hire an attorney to represent them to get their land back. There is a legislator in South Georgia of the House who represents Lee County. He had a constituent call him about this issue, and their clerk of court called him and referenced this story where apparently there was a property owner. He got a quitclaim deed, tried to file it at the court from someone out of state, and the property was for his parents. They were 96 and 97, and the clerk knew the family for a long time and knew that they weren't trying to sell their land anytime soon. So the clerk called the family and said, "What is this deed? I know you're not transferring your land." The property owner said, "That's not us," and they were able to stop the filing of the deed. Well, then this individual, this scammer, came back and tried to sue them for damages, saying that he wasn't allowed to purchase the land, and he tried to sue them for $75,000 in compensation, in addition to what he said was his right to the property. So the son of these elderly individuals, he had to hire an attorney to represent his family to get out of this horrible situation, and that cost him $16,000, and that's money he's never going to get back, right? So this is sort of a pay-it-forward bill for those individuals who this may be happening to, so we can try and put a lid on this horrible real estate scam, which is basically, it's land theft. So it's pretty crucial for us, it's crucial for Georgians, and I will stand for any questions.
Senator Setzler.
Thank you. I want to give justice to people who you shouldn't have to roll $16,000 of attorney's fees out to defend yourself.
Yes.
Does this have a guaranteed attorney's fees provision in this if you prevail on the merits?
Yes, sir. There is. There are definitely parts for that.
Yes, there is.
So section 2.2 on 219, line 219. In any case where the defendant fraudulently created the instrument, the complainant shall be entitled to recover all costs, including reasonable attorney's fees.
Thank you. And, just real quick, and, are these penalties $600 per violation adequate? And in that provision where they're sending out is every solicitation a violation? If it's sent, is that a violation, or does it have to be?
If it's sent without these provisions listed on it.
So everything you drop, if you drop in the mail 100 of these, it's 100 times $600 if you're caught for that. That's what you're saying.
Or that the 3 times damages sustained, but you would have to prove damages.
But that's so unless someone fell into this scheme, there would be no actual damages. But
Yes,
every time, is this constructed in a way that for everyone that's sent out a $600 penalty?
Yes, sir. If it doesn't contain this information.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure we've got the penalties that are. There's got to be a monetary pop to somebody who's going to make a lot of money on this. I just want to make sure we're not
Yes, sir.
shooting too low.
I think it is. We're good with that. If you are, I have no issues with the amount.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, what's the pleasure of the committee? Motion to pass by committee substitute from Senator Watson, a second from Senator Setzler. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. And who is carrying the bill in the Senate?
At your discretion, Mr. Chairman.
At my discretion. Senator Hatchett? All right. Senator Setzler, you like this bill. Actually, Senator Goodman should do it because we have his bill in there.
Senator Goodman
will
would
do
really
it.
like this.
And Betsy, you did such a good job on this. You are an attorney, right?
No, sir.
You're not an attorney?
How much? Technically, I didn't say that one statement.
That's true. You didn't say but. Yeah. All right. I'll let you slide this time because the hour is late.
It's my first day, so I know what not to say.
That's right. You did a good job. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Committee.
All right. We're getting close to the end. Someone who is an attorney, so I lost my chance to get any money in the bucket. House Bill 926. Representative Reeves, working off of
LC 48-1298S.
There you go.
Thank you,
Floor is
Chairman
yours.
Strickland and members of the Judiciary Committee. This is Second Chance Workforce Bill. Top issue as we started this session was workforce issues. I looked at the Atlanta News during part of that public trust debate, and we are the second state in the country in terms of a nursing shortage. So healthcare workforce in many sectors of our economy are in need. Here in Georgia and Atlanta or the rest of the state, if you lose your driver's license, that's going to interfere with work. This committee, I know members of this committee have worked on driver's license issues. What this bill does is 2 things. Number one, if you have a low-level misdemeanor offense in municipal court or the like, if it's not a DUI, if it's not a child support issue, and you somehow screw up your court date, let's say you're working late, you forget your court date, or another reason, this gives you an additional ability to engage with the court, engage with DDS to keep your driver's license for getting revoked for months and getting in that limbo of having to go through the lengthy process of getting your driver's license reinstated. This allows the courts and the DDS to work with defendants who take the initiative to report and reschedule their court date to keep their license. Department of Driver Services worked a lot on this bill. Municipal court judges, including Judge Gary Jackson here in Atlanta, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce helped greatly, as well as the criminal justice reform community, and I thank them so much. There was a late addition that was added before it got voted on in the House, and that is a healthcare workforce provision that Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and Eggleston requested to add them to the Safer Hospitals Act last year, which was very popular among nurses. So this lets nurses get to work with their driver's license, then be safe once they're at work. So this is a great workforce bill, and thank you for hearing it today, and I respectfully request your approval to do pass this bill. Glad to take any questions.
Any questions, Representative Reeves? All right, there are 2 people signed to speak on the bill, both for it. Wade Askew with Georgia Justice Project. We've had a long day.
It's been a day.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get rid of me today.
I know. Well, you helped me out earlier a couple times in committee myself, so.
I'll just be very quick. Wade Askew, Policy Director at Georgia Justice Project. This bill absolutely fills a need to help get people back into the workforce. I'll just leave it there. I think it's a great bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And last, James Woodall, Southern Center for Human Rights.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll also be very brief. We just want to thank Representative Reeves for his work on this bill, as well as the last-minute addition and working with the community on that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. What's the pleasure of the committee? Senator Setzler.
Move to pass, Mr. Chairman. I was going to say there's a constituent of mine, out-of-state college kid that had a traffic offense that wanted to actually talk about to the judge. There was the facts around it were somewhat in question, and because he was out of state and some things happened, almost missed court, and this is an important bill. So,
a motion to pass by committee substitute from Senator Setzler. Do we have a second? Second from Senator Hatchett. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. And who is carrying this one?
Senator Cowser.
Senator Cowser. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Last bill on the agenda. Senator Hatchett is going to present for us, filling in for Chairman Powell. House Bill 993, a bill we heard previously in committee last week, and Senator Hatchett worked on getting some changes to clean up the bill. After the committee, if you may recall, there was some changes actually requested by the author as well at the time. So the floor is yours. Working off LC 48129-8S. No, wrong bill. I was doing so well, I thought. LC 570121S. Is that right? That's correct. All right. Floor is yours.
Bill 993. We had a lot of testimony on this bill, including a pretty powerful story from Susan Cobb about her daughter. What this bill seeks to do is codify the crime of grooming of a minor. I think most on the committee remember the testimony, and it was pretty emotional. What this bill seeks to do is obviously do that, and based on the comments from the committee, PAC and Chairman Powell and myself, I think we addressed the concerns. So the original bill has been amended and is in Section 2 of the bill. Section 1 of the bill, you may also see as being familiar, was another bill that we had that dealt with child pornography and possessing. Basically what it says is you cannot use the defense that child pornography is basically generated by AI technology when you're charged with sexual exploitation of a minor, and it's the exact same language we passed out of this committee unanimously. And at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to make a motion to pass.
Well, it's not the appropriate time. There's 3 people signed up to speak on the bill. Let's do the people that want to speak on the bill first. Do you have a question for the author, Senator Jones?
Thank you. I just had one question. It was line 45 on page 3. I just didn't understand how that works. It's just confusing me. Or another person believed by such person to be a minor residing in this state. So the person really wouldn't reside in the state? I mean, would we have jurisdiction over that? Maybe Pat can. I just don't understand it.
Okay, so either within or outside of this state, if such conduct involves a minor who resides in this state,
right, or
another person believed by such person to be a minor residing in this state. Well, I know this has been a long day and a long Judiciary Committee, so I just don't
understand how that works. Go ahead.
I can't think of an example for this. I don't know if Pat may.
What line are you on again?
And I'm for the bill. I just don't understand that line.
Yeah, it's line 45. The state or another person believed by such person. I guess it's an intent.
If it's a GBI agent,
It's a sting.
That's yeah.
That's what it is.
That's what it is. It's a 27-year-old male officer pretending to be a 14-year-old
Right.
girl.
Sting thing.
Mr. Smith, you want to bail us out, or Mr. Scandalakis, you want to come up?
I'm sorry. I really am sorry. And
I thought you were going to make your tie green. It's still purple.
Well, if that will make amends for what happened earlier, and I deeply apologize to the committee for what may have accidentally happened.
Nobody knows what you're talking about now. It's been so long. But I remember.
What line are we on?
44 and 45.
Isn't that just meant for someone operating undercover?
I would think so. I think this is also really wide open venue provision that got pulled from somewhere.
Who wrote it, Mr. Walker? Not it. You own it?
I can't. I mean, the only other kind of scenario that I could imagine is, geez, gosh, if someone was in an area that someone assumed was the state but was right outside the state, I don't. To me, this contemplates a sting, undercover.
Right.
Which would also be covered by doing this. Also, you'd still have the entrapment defense available to a defendant who gets lured in through improper conduct by the state. So it's, yeah, that's the only thing I can come up with right now is a undercover sting where it may pull people in from a border county or something like that.
All right. Okay, let's go to those assigned to speak on the bill. Thomas Weaver. Thanks for sticking with us.
Well, thank you for recognizing me to speak on second occasion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Before I dive into what I want to share, I want to take a moment to say that there are children in the room, so I'll be careful with my language and terminology, but in order to present a coherent and articulable argument, there's only so many words I can omit. We established in the last committee meeting, and it came from behind the bench, that 16 is the age of consent in Georgia. And to the extent that this new rendition LC number removes the Chapter 6 language, I concede the point that was a small victory on this, because it kind of tightens and narrows the elements that would put somebody into felony world here if they get caught up in this proposed newly created code section, subpart 5 of 1612-100. The trouble for me, though, it leaves intact that under 18, so I'm going to move away from the 16 now, and I'm going to give another hypothetical. I know it's late, but I'll be careful not to say those words. Someone, let's say someone is 17, move on when ready student. They're on their way to college or a university. They're older than the 16. We've covered that. That's been fixed. But they're still not quite 18 yet, but they're of age of consent. Move on when ready student, Georgia State, University of Georgia, Kennesaw, whatever college, Chattahoochee Tech, whatever college or university that may happen to be. And when they arrive, lo and behold, the person of their dreams over there, let's say a 21, 22-year-old senior ready to graduate, get that bachelor's. I can just, more than 48 months removed and over 18, but someone who's still within the ambit of this, despite the Romeo and Juliet. I just think that you remember that game show, Let's Make a Millionaire? I'm sure you all do. You remember one of the 3 lifelines that you had was poll the audience? I wonder if you were to poll the audience in each of your respective senatorial districts throughout the state, and you were to ask your constituents, just on a group poll during an electoral campaign stump, what do you think the age of consent is in Georgia? If it just came up in a town hall meeting, how many of your constituents do you think would know that on a factual basis the age of consent in Georgia is 16? So what I can imagine is, even though this measure is well-intentioned and more than a few of you have already shared that you're probably going to vote for it anyway, which is fine because the General Assembly defines crime and affixes punishment. But my concern is, to the best of my ability, what you're going to have is you're going to have a situation where someone who's not quite 18 is going to have a mother or a father over here who's going to be screaming for blood because they don't understand the age of consent is 16, and you're going to put the police in an awful mess because that suitor is going to say, hey, wait, I wasn't here to sexually offend or sexually traffic said 16 or 17-year-old. We were just in a consensual, amorous relationship, dating or courting that may eventually metamorphosize into some type of sexual act per se that doesn't come within the ambit of what constitutes a sexual offense under 1710 6.2 or sexual trafficking involving an exchange of value, whether through coercion or deception or otherwise, to someone who is not quite 18 yet. I think you're going to put your police, your deputy sheriffs, your county police, your county sheriff, your district attorney in a huge mess trying to unravel that when you have a parent who doesn't understand the age of consent law, because if you ask the average parent, they probably don't know that. And then you're going to have the alleged criminal defendant say, I wasn't here for the wrong reasons, I was here for the legal right ones. But under this, you say as a defense that the state could aver that, hey, that hasn't happened yet. That's not a defense, because the state could take the position that you were going to offend or traffic said alleged victim. I just think that this is going to create a huge mess. I don't make the decisions here, y'all do. If y'all want to pass it, but don't say I didn't tell you so.
You have a question from Senator Setzler.
To the gentleman for whom I have great respect and affection from Cherokee County. Line 36 of the bill, I raised the concern in a previous committee meeting around that issue of 18 being, because 16 being the age of consent, I thought there was an incongruity there. The author raised to me on line 36, it says, all of these things are limited by the conditions of to engage in a sexual offense or in trafficking of persons.
Right.
So the sexual offense thing, when you look at these offenses, many of them specify age 16 or below as a requirement. So even if the term minor applied, it wouldn't meet the condition of under age 16 for sexual offense in that circumstance. That was that ameliorated some of my concerns from the previous committee meeting when I kind of went through these offenses. So am I missing something?
No, I concede the point also, but what I'm saying is, can I use you as an example with
Perhaps.
your permission?
Sure. Perhaps.
Okay.
Sure.
Can I use the chair as an example? All right. And let's say you're the father of a 16 or 17-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that person happens to be the chair.
Okay.
Okay. Let's say there's an amorous relationship of some type that evolves between this person seated to my left and the chair. And let's say a third party, a prosecutorial actor, is brought into, and I'm trying to be careful because I know there's children in the room, they're brought into the math because there's been an arrest made where the state avers this alleged criminal defendant, we think, had sexual offense and or sexual trafficking tendencies that transcend what the law allows under this, despite the fact that the alleged victim is at least 16 or 17. What it would do is the person who is being arrested, whether at the time of arrest or later in trial, because of the language in this bill, they wouldn't be able to say, even if the assertion was honest, that, hey, I didn't want to, like you said, I wasn't there for a sexual offense reason. That's the wrong reason. That's an illegal reason. I wasn't there for a sexual trafficking reason. That's the wrong reason. That's an illegal reason. They would be barred under this from introducing that because the state would be able to say, even if that hadn't occurred yet, you're not allowed to introduce that it hasn't because we think you were there for that reason. So basically the actor would be saying, hey, I was here for a sexually appropriate reason because that door's still open. The legislature didn't shut that one. It's going to create a huge mess. Because I wouldn't there. there are children in the room. I wasn't there to exploit. I was there to consensual. Even if the alleged victim said I was also willing to consent, it just creates a.
If consent was the intention, there's no underlying sexual offense.
Right, but the state would be able to assume the posture that the state thinks, because my wager, if this was a casino and this was the gambling table and I was all in on the chips, when you have a parent who's screaming that they don't understand that, the officer is probably going to be under immense pressure to effectuate an arrest anyway, and I would hope that the training would be there to acknowledge those differences, but I think it's just going to create a huge mess.
I think, and I err when I try to remember code sections. I think it's 1665.1 that is the unlawful sexual contact with kids in schools and so forth. I read the 18 threshold being if it's a 35-year-old teacher or a 25-year-old teacher and a 17-year-old student, then under 1665.1, you are still, it is still an offense, and you do this does apply to you.
Right.
But if it's outside that school setting, then it doesn't.
Right.
Because it's going to be a threshold of 16.
Well, the 1665.1, if I may, Mr. Chairman, that's applicable to all manner of actor and all manner of victim, regardless of age.
Outside.
Well, not just schools, though.
Right, but this, you couldn't get grooming for a 19-year-old in that setting. In this setting, it would be 18 and under. But I mean, I think it captures that 16 to 18-year-old student, which is still felony land and in a school.
Unless the student's receiving special education, they would have. I mean, students age out of mandatory compulsory education at 16 anyway. I don't think many people would know that, but.
Yes, sir.
I'll also say that for the purposes of the 1665.1, just to be clear, that encapsulates a variety, a myriad of all other circumstances. I alluded to that last time: officer, arrestee, hospital worker, patient. There's a variety of different, and age has nothing to do with it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Weaver. Ms. Maisie Lynn Girton.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Long night. Thanks for hearing from me at the very end. So I'm going to say something that I've said before when the language that's now been added as Section 1 was considered separately. But it does have a different context tonight because, I don't know, a couple of hours ago, you considered House Bill 1361, which is the AI porn bill, as they've been calling it in the hallways. And in that bill, the punishment rubric does what I have been encouraging you to consider doing, and that is distinguishing AI from real children. Whereas 1612-100, which is considered in House Bill 993, this exclusion of using AI as a defense to 1612-100, in a way, it's sort of, you might as well call Representative Thomas and tell him his bill is sort of useless if both pass, because that won't be used. This one will. It gets 5 to 20. It doesn't get just 1 to, sorry, I knew it a little while ago, 1 to 15. Removing Section 1 from House Bill 993 as it's been presented tonight would allow this more narrowly tailored AI response to AI in this. And I agree, children are vulnerable. This is not a, I mean, as Mr. Weaver, danced around the language because it's hard to talk about around children, but it's also hard to consider that it's children that it involves. I don't diminish any of that, but there is a distinction between harming children to create this kind of material and fashioning it from computer graphics. And the separation between House Bill 1361 and what we have currently in code in 1612-100 recognizes that. Taking this defense away in the context of 1612-100, it pretty much ameliorates that distinction, in my view. And I would just ask you to consider that amendment, take this back to your perfected version of what passed the House. And
Senator
go
Senator
forward from
Setzler.
I would take issue with what you said there respectfully in section 1. I raised this to Senator Kennedy when we were talking about the AI bill.
Okay.
And I thought we were conflating two ideas, this idea of this handcrafted personal creation of these images and the creation of these by AI. And sometimes people conflate the two, but they're different.
Okay.
The 1361 bill was AI creates the images. This is some creep with technology creates images that look like a child, but is man-made, as it were, versus it was created by an AI algorithm. So I think there's a distinction. I don't think it's the same. I don't think they're positioned the same. No, the answer may be 5 to 20 may not be the answer. That's a policy question, but I do think they're different. Am I reading this the right way? And this is something that an individual creates through technology to represent a peer that an identifiable minor is engaging in sexually explicit conduct, but it's not AI created. The other one was AI created.
So the point of adding, as I understand this language that's been added to 993 at lines 14 through 19, it is to remove the possibility that someone says these are created images because they were created, adapted, or modified to appear that an identifiable minor was engaging in sexually explicit conduct. Doesn't say it couldn't be done with AI. Doesn't say, I mean, it's not regulating necessarily which tool you're using, Photoshop or Paint, or I don't know what the different types of software programs are, but it certainly includes AI. It doesn't exclude it.
So if we were to pass both bills and they were in different code sections, wouldn't it, you prosecute this, but when you get into sentencing, would it be sentenced over in the AI, if AI was used, wouldn't it be sentenced over in the from a lenity perspective, wouldn't it be sentenced over in the AI side of the house, which is not as severe as this?
So, it's a good question. I don't believe so, because these aren't, the elements don't track exactly between this newly created, if it were to be created, 161280 and 1612-100. There may be one, like 1612-100 has several different ways it can be committed, and that's recognized in the different ways that it can be sentenced. For instance, you all were talking earlier about whether or not you can violate 1612-100 by mere possession, and you can, but it's a misdemeanor. When you get into the creation and distribution, then it becomes a felony. They're different. They are different enough that I do not believe, if I understand lenity, that it would apply, because the elements are not. It's not like you're, one can't sort of subsume the other, but for some minor difference. So I don't believe that's the case. You would be charged under 1612-100 and or 1612-80. My guess is you'll just be charged with both, and as often as they can win on 100, they're going to try, because they're going to get the higher sentence there, irrespective of the fact that a child is harmed or not in real life. That if it's, an AI creation, you're not going to be able to use that as a defense under this if it's passed. And certainly, the new bill contemplates using AI to make the creation.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Girton.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Last person on the list, Ms. Lelaine Briones. And close us out.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I know you've been here it's been a long day. Elaine Briones with the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. I do want to address Section 1 with regard to 1612-100. 1612-100 and the bill that you are discussing, the AI Bill 1361, are two very different things. The sexual exploitation bill requires prosecutors to prove that a real child was actually used in that image. What this does is say that we are not going to allow people to morph images. So there's part of that child within that image. We have to prove that part of that child was used in that image. All this is saying is we are not going to allow you to morph images and get away with that. So that's what that does. With regard to Section 2, we took into consideration all of the comments from the last hearing. We believe we resolved all of those issues. And again, with regard to the question about the minor, what this bill does, it allows prosecutors to go to Code Section 1710.6.2, which defines sexual offenses. And those sexual offenses are the following: ag assault with intent to rape, sodomy, stat rape, child molestation, enticing a child for indecent purposes, improper sexual contact by employee or agent, incest, and sexual exploitation. Some of those offenses require the person to be a child. Some of those offenses require the person to be a minor. What this bill does is it allows us to prosecute people who are contacting either children or minors, either for the purpose of sexual exploitation or child molestation. So what we would do is, as prosecutors, if we have a child who's a minor, child molestation, and you're being contacted for that, we would have to use the underlying offense of child molestation. If you have a 17-year-old who's being contacted for the purpose of sexual exploitation, we would have to use sexual exploitation. And what would happen is the defense attorney would file a demurrer to our indictment. So the person would have to be a child, and the underlying would have to be an offense that you could only prosecute for a child. I know that's not clear. I'm trying to make it as clear as I can. But what this does is what you're saying as a policy. We are going to protect minors, children up to minors, against sexual offenses when people are trying to prey on them and trying to groom them to commit these sexual offenses. And with that, if you don't have any other questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions from the committee? All right, thank you. Is there anyone to speak on the bill? What's the pleasure of the committee? Motion to pass by committee substitute, Senator Hatchett, second from Senator Setzler. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. And I'm assuming you're carrying the bill. All right. You want to hear a couple more bills while I read it, or do I'm really feeling like we should keep rolling? I think I left 30 minutes ago mentally. Yeah. Thank you all for sticking with us. We're adjourned.